Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch, Leolam Va'ed. Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch, Leolam Va'ed. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי ננאי 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 נאי 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 השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי נאי oy nay 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 השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. ננאי 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 nay 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 oy nay 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 oh Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. La la la, la la la. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. La 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 the whole world shake, my heart. La 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 Olevim Eshiro Olevimero Avyoshe Yisro Avyoshe Yisro Avyoshe Yisro La 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 Now listen to me, my most beautiful friends. Sometimes you want to send a message to someone you love so much, but you don't know where they are. But then there are always two who always know wherever he is. And you and I know that Elio Hanovi lives forever, because he's every Eid's best friend. So it's Elio Hanovi, Elio Tishbe, Elio Gilodi. He's sending messages to all of Israel who still has not come to the Holy Land. And some of the Eden are so far away, not only physically, mentally, spiritually. El Yanovi, please bring them back. Elio Hanovi, Elio Tishbe, Elio Angelo, Elio Angelo, Elio Hanovi, Elio Tishbe, Elio Angelo, Elio Angelo, Baby, Elio, Elio, Shia, Elio, no, yo, I know, Shia, Shia, hello, Mashiach, hello, Mashiach ben David.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. We are going to study this week Leviticus chapters 9 and hopefully 10. And we may have some internet problems. The ongoing saga of the internet never ceases to amaze me, but I think we're okay for now. But let me know if the internet gets a little bit sketchy, and I'll try to do what I could do. Shabbat Shalom, Tsuriel. Can you guys hear me okay right now? Can you guys hear me okay right now? See me okay? Does everything look normal? Somebody let me know, please. You guys can hear me okay? Somebody? Okay, good. All right, let's hope it stays this way. All right, so this is what I've been thinking about a lot this week. I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll start off my monologue by saying this. I've spent recently, for reasons I won't get into, I've had to spend some time with, not bad reasons, just boring reasons, with some non-Jews. And I've thought of this, I guess, a million times before, but I thought of it again, and I thought I'd try to articulate it and speak about it as the opening monologue this time. And one thing you notice is that the non-Jews, the non-Israelites, those who don't have an affinity towards the Torah, even non-Israelites who are Nilwim, who are supporters of Israel, have an affinity towards the Torah. But one of the big differences between Israel and non-Israel and other nations is that the other nations, they aren't able to make distinctions. They're not able to make separation and order. And I'll give you an example, and it'll become more clear what I'm saying. So for the non-Israelites, for the non-Jews, every day is just a regular day, including Saturday, Shabbat. They just call it Saturday, and including now in this day and age, Sunday. Yes, it's true that traditionally Christian societies did make Sunday into their Sabbath, into a special day, but they only did it because they were imitating the Jews, right? They only did this because Christianity is an Abrahamic, as they like to call it, Abrahamic religion. It's a derivative religion of the Torah, as are Islam and as is rabbinical Judaism. All three of those are rabbinical or derivative religions of true Torah. And so we also see in the Islamic world that they have Mosque Day on Friday, which is kind of like their Shabbat. They don't work in the mornings. They'll go to the mosque. That's why it's called Mosque Day. They'll listen to a lovely, peaceful, lovely, peaceful sermon by their imam, and then they'll have a big meal, and then in the afternoon they will just resume their regular business. I saw this when I was in Morocco. I've spent, believe it or not, about close to a year of my life, not consecutively, but close to a year of my life, I've actually spent in Morocco. I was there for 2 periods of 6 months, 3 months each. So that was 6 months. And then I was there a number of more times, maybe not quite a year, but something like 9 or 10 months of my life I've spent in Morocco. So I saw Islamic culture, up close and personal, aside from the type that you see in Israel. There I spent a lot of time. Yeah, so that's Mosque Day. So that's also kind of a derivative, right? That's a derivative religion. But if you look at other religions, that are not derivative of the Torah, they have no conception of a special day of the week. And if you look at secular, secular non-Jewish society, Goyish society, if you want to call it that, they have no conception. Saturday is just another day. Sunday is just another day. So the only societies that have some kind of concept that Shabbat, one day of the week, is a special day are first and foremost Israel, and then those societies that base themselves in one way or another on Israel. But the point is, it all comes from Israel. So we see that the Goyim, I will use that expression, they are not able to make distinctions. Everything's the same for them. All days of the week are the same. I'm going to give you another example. The Goyim, and I'm sorry to use that phrase, but that's what I'm going to use. The Goyim, they can't make a distinction between clean foods and unclean foods. Everything's all the same to them. It doesn't matter if you eat horse or pig. Well, let's not go with horse because, let's go with things that are acceptable in Western, in European, and American society. And of course, America is a derivative society of Europe, ultimately. And, they'll eat pig, they'll eat octopus, they'll eat shrimp. The list goes on. Lobster, all kinds of hideous, disgusting foods, and they don't make a distinction. To them, there's no difference between an unclean food and a clean food. They can't understand why. What's the difference? It's all food. I say this because I've had discussions with these particular goyim that I've had to interact with a lot over the past week or so. And that's the answer I get. Oh, what is this? Every day is, there's nothing special about any day. Every day is any other day. Or, why do you make a, distinction between one type of food and the other food? It's all the same. Cow's disgusting too. How could you say that cow's not disgusting? How could you say that chicken's not disgusting? It's all disgusting. So what's the difference if we eat shrimp and lobster and all this kind of stuff? The bottom line is that the goyim, they are not able to make distinctions. Everything is blurred together as a whole. And we could find many more examples, but I'll take those 2 examples. So what's the point? The point is, if we go back to Genesis chapter 1, we see that what God did, what Yahweh did in Genesis chapter 1 is the first thing he does is make distinctions. He makes distinctions between light and darkness. He makes distinctions between the water, or the rakia, the water that's above in the sky, the water that's below in the sky. He makes distinctions between the oceans and the dry land. He makes distinctions between day and night, giving the sun the power, giving the sun the rule over the day and the moon the rule over the night. He makes distinctions between different types of animals. He creates the fish, and then he creates the fowl, and he creates the land animals, and ultimately he creates human beings. So the whole thing is, and if we look at it, I'll actually open it up. I won't share it, but let me just bring it up for a second. No, I won't. I'm just going to wing it. So the whole thing is, we see that the earth starts out as tohu vavohu. Tohu vavohu means everything is mixed together. It's basically more or less equivalent to the Greek concept of chaos, right? In Greek mythology, not that I claim to be an expert in Greek mythology, but from what I remember from the high school Greek mythology that was forced down all of our throats as we grew up in the United States, is that the gods came. When the gods came, there was chaos, and or was it the Titans ruled over chaos? I don't know, whatever, I'll just make it up. Okay, the gods came and there was chaos, and they started taking the chaos and making some order out of it. Okay, well, in a certain sense that's right, but there are no gods. There's only God, there's only Yahweh, and that's what Genesis chapter 1 speaks about. Taking this tohu vavohu, where everything's mixed together, where there's no distinctions between day and night, there's no distinctions between land and sea, there's no distinctions between different types of animals, and so forth, and making these distinctions, building things. And when we think about it further, any time that we, as human beings, and we are made in the image of Yahweh, we're made in the image of God, any time that we craft something or build something or do something productive, write something, cook something, whatever it is, we are taking unordered stuff, we're taking chaos, and we're turning it into order. Let's take building a house, okay? Building a house, if you're going to build your own house, you have a bunch of material dumped on in the lot, and now you have to, and it's all mushed, it's all jumbled all together, and you have to use your Tselem Elohim, you have to use your quality of being made in the image of God, in the image of Yahweh, and now you have to make some order out of all of that, and you build a house, and it has order. Before it was chaos, it was all mixed together. And by the way, the technical meaning of chaos is that everything is mixed together without distinction. Okay, day and night are mixed together, land and sea are mixed together, and then the separation in the making of order is a separating things out and putting everything in its proper place. That's everything we do when we craft something, when we make something, we write something, when we write an article, or when we write a book. We're taking from a pool of infinite words, and we're crafting. We're making a certain order to the words. We're building something that is ordered out of that, right? So this is the essence of Yahweh, and by extension, this is the essence of what Israel is taught to do by Yahweh, and is commanded, is in contract, is in a covenant to do with Yahweh, is to make these various distinctions. And again, I'll give the two examples of the Shabbat being separate from the other 6 days, the clean foods being separate from the non-clean foods, and we are supposed to do this, and we're of course supposed to try to teach it to the rest of the world, and they are capable of understanding it sometimes. But that's one of the big differences we see between Israel. When I say Israel, I mean Israelites, Jews who actually keep the Torah, and the rest of the world, which does not know Yahweh. They know their foreign gods like Jesus. They know their foreign gods like, whatever the pantheon of 10 million Hindu gods is, and so on. And so they don't make distinctions. Everything is all mushed together for them. Clean foods, unclean foods, it's all the same. And they'll even mock. They will even mock Jews for making distinctions. Again, I gave the example, why do who's to say that a pig is clean and a pig is unclean? The only reason that the pig was made unclean is because in ancient times, the people knew that pigs made you sick. And so they came up with this fake idea of clean animals, and who's to say that that a cow, it's all, and I hear a lot, it's all just a societal, the way you grew up in a particular society. If you grew up in China, you'd think that snakes were acceptable to eat, or rabbits, or God knows what, or cats. or if you grew up near a Chinese restaurant in New York, I guess, or in London, then so the point is that they not only are they not able to make distinctions, they mock the distinctions that we as Israelites make. To them, it doesn't make any sense. To them, it's just all it's all magical. It's all magical, mystical kind of stuff that doesn't really have any grounding or any basis in reality. So that's the main thing that I wanted to point out today, is the difference between Israel, where we make distinctions, we put things in order, we're commanded by Yahweh to put things in the world in a certain order, in our society in a certain order, in our lives in a certain order, and the Goyim who unless they learn from Israel, do not do this and cannot do this. And right now, these Goyim that I've had to interact with a lot in the past 2 weeks or so, they are just sitting at home. I'm not with them today, but they are sitting at home, and it's just another day for them. They're watching a movie on television. They're getting some errands done. They're stuffing their faces with with fat, their fat faces with frozen pizza, etc. There's no sense that today is a special day. It's just all merged together, and the same with the foods that they're going to eat. So those are my thoughts for the day. As Israel, we make distinctions. We take chaos, we take tohu vohu, and we make order out of it, in following in the way that Yahweh taught us, and that we are in contract, we are in covenant with Him to do. And those who do not know the ways of Yahweh, those who do not know God, then they have no ability. They are almost like stuck back in the state of the world before it was turned from chaos into order. Of course, they live in an ordered world because Yahweh runs the place, but in their own lives, they're very unordered. Everything is just all merged together. Everything is melded together. Everything is chaos. And again, the technical idea behind chaos is there's no distinction between things. It's the same as entropy, right? Entropy is a measure of how much disorder, of how much lack of distinction there is in a system. So, for instance, the classic example is you have two glasses. One is a glass of lukewarm water, and another is a glass of hot water with ice cubes that you put in it, with ice cubes. Okay, which is in a state of greater entropy? The one that's in a state of greater entropy means greater chaos. Okay, well, you'd think that the one, you might think in layman's terms, that the one that is hot water with ice in it is in a state of greater chaos, because hot water, ice, it doesn't mix, and blah blah blah, things are going to happen. But no, that's not true. Actually, the lukewarm water is in a state of greater chaos because everything is mixed together. It's all the same temperature. Okay, it has maximum entropy. It has maximum mixing together. There are no distinctions made. And the glass that has the hot water with the ice cubes in it, it's actually in a lower state of entropy. It's actually in a lower state of chaos because you have the ice cubes, which are distinct from the hot water. And when things are in a lower state of entropy, then the second law of thermodynamics says that they will eventually tend towards equilibrium, meaning that the ice cubes are going to melt, and the hot water is going to get a little bit cooler, until ultimately it turns into that glass of lukewarm water. And once it does, nothing else happens. There's now no distinctions between anything. There's nowhere to go. There's no potential energy for it to change from a state of distinction to a state of non-distinction, because it's already gone there, right? So then we have to, if we want to bring it back, if we want to take that lukewarm water and bring it back to a state of hot water and ice cubes, then we have to take some of the water and we have to boil it. We have to take some of the rest of the water. We have to put it in the freezer, and then we can get our ice cubes and our hot water back. But in order to do that, we have to expend energy, and we have to expend will, and we have to expend thought, and we have to take that lukewarm water and we have to craft it into something else. It just won't happen by itself. But the opposite will happen. If you just leave the ice cubes sitting in the hot water, they will, just by themselves, by the second law of thermodynamics, the ice cubes will cool down the hot water. Or more technically, what will happen is the heat from the hot water will warm up the ice cubes until it all just reaches a state of equilibrium, and that is the state of chaos. That is the state of tohu vavohu. So again, equilibrium, tohu vavohu, chaos. These are all ways of saying that distinctions are not made in this world or in whatever system you're talking about. Okay, and to go from order to chaos this will happen naturally. The classic example they always give is if you just leave your room, alone, it will just naturally get messy. You don't have to expend a lot of energy, and after a couple of weeks, your room will be a complete mess. But if you want to take a messy room and clean it up, you have to expend energy. You have to think how to do it. You have to make a plan. You have to use your will to do it. You have to use your brains to do it. You have to expend energy to take it from that state of a mess, which is chaos, which is tohu vavohu, which is equilibrium, everything mixed together all as one, and put it in order, a state of order. Okay, and that's what Yahweh does in creation of the earth, and until this very day, and that is what's described in Genesis chapter 1. So the basic bottom line is that the goyim are in a greater state of chaos. They're in a greater state of I don't even want to use the word equilibrium because it has a positive connotation, and it's not positive in this sense. They're in a greater state of everything being melded together with no distinction. They're in a greater state of entropy. They're in a greater state of chaos, tohu vavohu, everything melding together, and entropy. And we Israelites, we are in a greater state of order, making distinctions, changing the chaos into order, changing the tohu vavohu into light versus darkness, day versus night, land versus sea. And in our lives, Shabbat versus the other 6 days, the holidays, the Moadim versus all of the other days of the year, Rosh Chodesh versus all the other days of the month, clean foods versus non-clean foods, even places such as Jerusalem versus the rest of the world, the Temple Mount versus the rest of Israel, shall we say, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's basically what I want to say today, and that's basically my monologue. Hello, Paul. How are you? I'm going to mute you. Okay. And if you need to say something, you can. Okay, so that's it. I hope it's clear. I hope it makes sense. And again, we as Israelites, we should always think of ourselves as being in contract, in covenant with Yahweh, with God, to bring order to the world, His order, the way He sees the world should be set up. And we should think of the non-Israelites, and especially those who have no contact, no zikah, as they say in Hebrew, no tendency or no affinity towards Israel, towards Yahweh, towards the Jews, as basically being stuck in a state of chaos, the same way the world was stuck before Yahweh came along and started making those distinctions as described in Genesis chapter 1. Okay, so that's that. Any questions, any comments before we dig into this week's Torah study? Okay, Whitey Boy says no, and therefore the answer is no. Okay, so let me share the screen now. And we're going to we're going to pick up where we were. I've basically decided to disconnect from the rabbinical weekly parsha at this point in time, because for various reasons, I just felt like I felt like we were just, or I was being too beholden to get through the entire parsha. And it caused a situation where we're not really able to understand. This way we can kind of go at our own pace, and we can cover what we need to cover. We can cover what we're able to cover, and we don't have to keep up with the Joneses, or as a old rabbi of mine used to say, keep up with the Coneses, right? We don't have to be in sync with this rabbinical weekly portion calendar, which it's artificial anyway. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a way for them to go through the Torah once a year. There are other calendars that different rabbinical communities in different places and over different times have used, such as a 2-year cycle, a 3-year cycle. But we don't have to be beholden to any of that. And this way we could just kind of slow down and take our time. And especially, as I've been saying for a bunch of weeks now, what we can do is we can realize and hopefully see that these portions in the Torah that are, as I always like to term them, that are generally thought of as Torah flyover country, right? Everyone can't wait for them to be over because they just seem so irrelevant and so boring. And as I always tell the story of, I've literally seen rabbis fall asleep during the Torah readings of these portions. There's no war, and there's no story, there's no narrative. It just seems to be boring law, and the whole congregation in a rabbinical synagogue just kind of rushes through it, and by the end, everyone, you just see the look of, the look of complete and utter boredom on everyone's face, and they're already chattering among themselves and can't wait for it all to be over so they can go eat the kugel and the gefilte fish. So we don't want to do that, because what we want to do is we want to really understand that these topics are fascinating, and if you see them as a system, again, we were talking about order versus chaos. If you see them as an ordered system where everything kind of fits together beautifully, then it just gives so much more understanding to the whole thing. And these chapters, these so-called boring chapters, these so-called chapters of Torah flyover country, actually become some of the most fascinating chapters if studied, if studied in the right way. If studied, let's say, the way you might study a topic in astronomy, or a topic in physics, or a topic in biology, or whatever your favorite subject is, if you just kind of like examine it and pick it apart, it really becomes a beautiful whole. So that being said, we spoke about the five basic types of sacrifices. Again, I'll review. It's the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. And those are the colloquial translations. And those were chapters 1 through 7. In chapter 8, we spoke about the inauguration of the Kohanim into their office, and the various sacrifices, or the various ceremonies that were done regarding that. And we pointed out also that up until Leviticus chapter 8, meaning from Genesis chapter 1 through Leviticus chapter 8, approximately halfway through the Torah, not a single sacrifice, not a single official sacrifice according to the rules of sacrifices, according to the rules of the systematized worship of service of Yahweh, has yet been offered. Okay, in the last half of the book of Exodus, we spoke about all the details of building the tabernacle, the clothing for the high priest and for the rest of the priests. And at the end of Exodus, as I mentioned last week, God, Yahweh's glory, descends into the tent of meeting. So now he moves into his house, right? His house. He describes how he wants his house built. It's his house after all. He can build it any way he wants. Just like if you go to an architect and you say, "Listen, I'm paying you good money. This is how I want my house built," then the architect is going to build it that way, as long as they can, And then at the end of Exodus, his house is ready and it's moving day. He moves in. His glory, the kavod Yahweh, descends into the tent of meeting. And then Leviticus 1 through 7, we just have a description of the details of the different types, the 5 different basic types of sacrifices. And then in Leviticus 8, we have the ordination, or the installation of the Kohanim. So what do you think we're up to in chapter 9? Well, in chapter 9, this is going to be the beginning of the Kohanic service in the tent of meeting for the first time ever in the history of Israel. Yes, there were altars built, there were sacrifices offered. We saw this in the past, but this is the first time that the systematized worship of Yahweh in the tabernacle, in the tent of meeting, in what later became the Beit Yahweh, the house of Yahweh, or the Holy Temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. This is the first time now that this service is going to take place, is going to start. It starts right here, okay? And what day is it? Let's see if we can kind of get an idea. I think if we go back to Leviticus 1. Let's see. Let's get a timestamp on this. I know it's somewhere. Maybe it was in chapter 7. Is it? If however the offering, listen to in and present. Let's see. 1 second here. If not, we'll just skip it. Oh, this is Leviticus chapter 7. No, I want Leviticus chapter 8. 1 second. This is what the oil presented sin of the ram offering. They presented the ram. Let's do something else. They said, "Look, cook the meat." 7 days. I don't see where. I know how we could do this. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to search it down right now. Okay, but somewhere or another we can get an actual time for this. Okay, but we saw there was a 7-day installation ceremony in Leviticus chapter 8. we saw there was essentially a 7-day installation ceremony for the Kohanim. Okay, and where do we see this most clearly? Okay, in Leviticus chapter 8, verse 33, do not leave the entrance to the tent of meeting for 7 days until the days of your ordination are completed, for your ordination will last 7 days. So there's 7 days where the Kohanim who are being installed are not allowed to leave the courtyard of the tabernacle, the courtyard of the tent of meeting. Okay, let me just go back 1 second. Now it's bothering me. I think at the end of Exodus, maybe it gives a specific date. 1 second. So tabernacle. Okay. Okay, so this tabernacle was set up on the first day of the first month. This is the second year. So we can get another timestamp here. It doesn't say. Okay, we're not going to search it down right now. Anywho, so sometime in the second year, okay, this is the Levitical service begins, and it follows this 7-day consecration or ordination ceremony that we saw in Leviticus chapter 8. And then on the 8th day, okay, and we see 7 days and then an 8th day in many places throughout the Torah. We know we spoke about Shabbat. The Shabbat is every 7th day. A week is 7 days. Of course, Sukkot is 7 days, and then the 8th day is Shmini Atzeret. Passover is 7 days. Even Hanukkah, which if you read the book of Maccabees, the first and second books of Maccabees, you see is based on a number of things. It's based on the 7-day inauguration period that is spoken about, or the 8-day inauguration period that's spoken about when King Solomon inaugurates the Holy Temple, and it's also based on the 8 days of Sukkot, 8 days including Shmini Atzeret, because it says that the Israelites during that time, during Sukkot, were out in the caves, out in the wilderness, fighting against the Greeks, and so they couldn't celebrate it properly. And so the book of Maccabees speaks about how they when they were able to finally rededicate the temple after they defeated the Greeks, that they celebrated, or they called for an 8-day celebration. That's Hanukkah, in order to somehow compensate for the 8 days they missed during Sukkot when they were out fighting against the Greeks. Because of course Hanukkah took place about 2 months after the end of Sukkot, right? Okay, so here we are in Leviticus chapter 9, and as we can see from the headline here, the priests begin their ministry. So this is now the first time on this 8th day, and again, if I had time now, I'd go try to hunt down a timestamp to get an exact day, but sometime in the second year, sometime towards the beginning of the second year, maybe it'll say later on here in this chapter. Now the Kohanim have finished their 7-day inauguration, their 7-day consecration period, and on the 8th day, they now begin their service which will continue continuously. Well, we shouldn't exactly say continuously, because there were some interruptions, but will continue more or less continuously until the Babylonians destroy the temple in 585, I believe is the date they usually give, 585 BCE. And this is now out in the wilderness, of course. So I think the date usually given for the travels out in the wilderness is, give or take, I can't remember the exact date, but about 1450 BCE. So we'll say 1450 to around 550, again, give or take. So that's about 900 years. So for 900 years straight, aside from when the Israelites had bad kings and went astray, and the service was discontinued, or unclean animals and foreign gods were worshipped on the Temple Mount. But essentially, for the next 900 years, this Kohanic service will continue more or less uninterrupted. And this is the very first day, sometime in the second year, when the Israelites are traveling out in the wilderness, that this service begins. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to switch over to the Hebrew. Again, as I always say, follow along. The ultimate is to follow along in Hebrew if you can. If you're still working on your Hebrew, then the next best option is to follow along in Hebrew with an English translation next to you, or whatever your favorite language is. And then if you don't want to do that, if that's too much work or you don't have that in front of you, then you should just follow along in English or whatever your favorite language is, such as Serbian. Shout out to my good friend. You know who you are. Okay, so here we go. So we're in Leviticus chapter 9. Okay. And the name of the parsha is Shmini. This does begin actually one of the rabbinical parshas that started a couple of weeks ago. It's called Shmini because the first significant, or shall we say the first non-common word is Shmini. Shmini means the 8th because it's on the 8th day. In other words, 7 days of inauguration of the Kohanim. And then on the 8th day, the service begins. Okay. So let's pick it up here. We are in Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1. And we have Wayahi Bayom Hashmini. So it was on the 8th day. The 8th day of what? The 8th day after the inauguration ceremony. The inauguration ceremony is 7 days. 8th day has now come. The ceremony is over. The Kohanim are installed. And now it's time to begin the systematic, I don't like to use the word cultic worship, even though that's the technical term that if you ever listen or read, academic lectures on the way that the Israelites or any society worship its God, they will call it the cultic service. It basically just means the systematized, the official service of a certain God. But I won't use that because it's too much of a loaded word in this day, so I'll use the word systematized. Okay, so it was on the 8th day. Moses called to Aharon, Lebanao, and to his sons. Aaron and Banav, whenever you see this phrase, Aaron means the Kohen Gadol, was at that time Aharon. Aaron was, of course, still alive. And his sons, Banao, literally at this point means his sons. Okay, he had 4 sons. Unfortunately, 2 of them died. That's in the next chapter. That's in Leviticus chapter 10, which we'll try to get to today. If not, we'll do it next week. So he called to Aaron and his sons. He has 4 sons. Okay, Lisiknei Israel, and to the elders of Israel. Verse 2. Wayomer el Aaron, and he said to Aaron, Kach lecha egel ben bakar, take for yourself an egel. Okay, let's bring up our. Let me bring this up here. We'll bring up our animal terms, but I'll just go with the translation here for now. So egel, they translate here as a bull. Okay, ben bakar, the son of an adult bull. So basically, it means a young bull. Okay, le hatat, as a sin offering. Okay, we now know what a sin offering. What is a sin offering? Okay, as long as we have it up, let's just do this. So let's go to animal terms for a second. Here's our animal terms. And let's find egel. There it is, right there. Oh, in fact, the example I give is from Leviticus 9 too. So egel is a baby calf. Okay, so it's basically a baby bull. Okay. And then let's go over to our sacrificial laws, which is not complete. I'm still working on it. Finish it whenever, maybe even next year when we do this again, or whenever we do it again. Okay, so it's called a sin offering, but really we saw it's a recompense from inadvertent offense. We know that now because we've studied the 5 basic types of offering. Okay, so hatat, this is an offering that's brought to atone for, to make up for inadvertent transgressions of the commandments. So why does Aaron need to do this? Because maybe during this entire installation period, maybe something went wrong. Maybe maybe they were in a state of impurity and didn't know it. Maybe they performed something incorrectly. So they are now kind of preemptively, or just in case, they are now bringing this recompense from inadvertent transgression, also known as a sin offering, on the 8th day. Okay. The ayal le'olat mimim, and an ayal is a ram. Okay, a ram is an adult male sheep. Okay, le'olah, as a burnt offering. We know what a burnt offering is. A burnt offering we're calling a fully burnt or a Holocaust offering. That's where the word Holocaust actually comes from. It means an offering in which the entire thing is tossed onto the altar of sacrifice, except for the skin. We learned that actually, I think it was last week. The skin is given to the Kohen who performs the burnt offering. And why would someone want a cow skin? Well, You ever heard of leather? You can make I guess Aaron could make himself a cool leather jacket and drive around on a motorcycle. Like, he could be like the Fonz of ancient Israel or something like that. Okay, so but in all seriousness, right, the skin is not appropriate even in a fully burnt offering where everything is thrown onto the altar. The skin, it's not appropriate to throw it onto the altar because originally, as we saw in Leviticus chapter 1, when the bull is in this case it's the ram, when the ram is, after it's slaughtered, it's skinned and then it's cut into pieces, and so the skin is given to the Kohen who performs the ceremony. At any rate, so a fully burnt offering for an unblemished ram, or with an unblemished ram, and bring it close, make it approach before Yahweh. In other words, sacrifice it before Yahweh. Okay, verse 3. And speak to the children of Israel, lemor, saying, to say, take a. What is sa'ir izim? Let's go back to our animal terms, and let's find sa'ir. Here it is. Sa'ir is a baby, it's a young male or female goat. It's a kid, okay? So take a sa'ir izim, a kid from the goats, lechatat, again, and now this is for the children of Israel, okay? Or from the children of Israel, okay, as a sin offering. Again, this is an offering brought to recompense for inadvertent transgression of commandments, where you transgress a commandment and you didn't know about it. So let's say you made contact with a source of ritual impurity, which we didn't even get to yet, and then you went into the courtyard of the temple. You have now transgressed, but if you didn't know about it, like let's say you were fast asleep and what can I think of an example? Someone who had been in contact with a dead person came up and touched you, and you had no idea. You didn't know you'd become ritually impure, and then the next day you went and brought a sacrifice in the tabernacle. Now you have inadvertently transgressed, and if you find out about it, you're supposed to bring this sin offering as recompense from inadvertent transgression offering. And so this is being done just in case for any inadvertent transgressions that might have occurred. Okay. And then we have an egel. Again, an egel is a calf, a keves. I'm just going to take the translations here. A lamb that are yearlings. Okay, meaning they're up to a year old, or maybe exactly a year old, more or less exactly a year old, unblemished as a burnt offering. Okay, so there are two sets of offerings brought. The first is a sin and burnt offerings by Aaron and his sons, and the second are sin and burnt offerings by or from the entire from all the children of Israel. Okay, v'shor v'ayel shlamim, and a shor is a bull. An ayal is a ram. Okay, the shlamim as peace offerings. Okay, peace offerings we learned about. Peace offerings are like good offerings. It's like, hey, just want to check in and say, how much I love you, God, and things are, just want to I want to check in a good way. I don't know, what are we calling it? Let's get our official translation for it. I think we're calling it a communion offering. Sacrificial laws. Peace or communion offering. So it's I want to commune with you. I want to bring this offering to kind of connect with you, to come close to you. Okay, but it's a positive offering. Remember, the burnt offering is kind of a general offering. It goes with a lot of different things. The grain offering is usually accompanies also other offerings. Then we have the peace offering. The peace offering is kind of a good or a positive offering, as examples here. And then we have the sin and the guilt offerings. They're kind of negative offerings. It's when something goes wrong, when something happened that shouldn't have happened. Okay, so this is peace offering. So this is like, hey God, just want to say how much I love you kind of offering. This is boach, to slaughter lifnei Yahweh, before Yahweh. Umincham, and it's grain offering. So here's the grain offering. That's chapter 2. So the grain offering is now accompanying this peace offering, this communion offering. Okay, so grain offering mincha blula b'shamen, mixed with oil. And whenever the Torah mentions oil, unless it's specific, and I think there's only maybe one or two places in the entire Torah where it speaks about, not one or two, but very few places where it speaks about other types of oil. Shemen always means olive oil, of course. Okay. Kayom Yahweh nir'a alechem. Because today, Yahweh is going to appear to you. So we're bringing sacrifices. Why? Because Yahweh is going to appear to the Israelites. And we'll see what that means below. And so they took, in other words, the children of Israel took what Moses had commanded, El Penei Ohel Moed, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, which means essentially the courtyard of the tabernacle. Yikrevu kol ha'edah ya'amdu lifnei Yahweh. And the entire congregation sacrificed it or offered it, and they stood before Yahweh. Okay, so it doesn't mean that everyone brought their own sacrifice. It means that these sacrifices were brought, one set of these sacrifices were brought on behalf of all of Israel, and then all of Israel, they stood before Yahweh, which means essentially in and around the courtyard of the tabernacle. Verse 6. Vayomer Moshe zeh hadavar asher tziva Yahweh ta'asu. And Moses said, this is the thing which Yahweh has commanded that you do, meaning bring these sacrifices. V'yira elechem kavod Yahweh. And the glory of Yahweh is going to appear before you, is going to appear to you. We've spoken a lot about this glory of Yahweh. This is what descended into the tent of meeting, into the tabernacle, on the ark cover between the cherubim. This is what is in the cloud that led Israel. This is what ultimately, when the Israelites are acting naughty many centuries on, this is what departs from the temple. This is God's presence on planet Earth. God himself, Yahweh himself, cannot live on planet Earth because he's outside of space, he's outside of time. He cannot be contained, or he cannot have physical properties. And nothing about him can have physical properties. So what lives, quote unquote, lives on planet Earth is always referred to as kavod Yahweh, the glory of Yahweh. The glory of Yahweh, it also itself, as I've mentioned a bunch of times now, is not a physical entity. It doesn't take up any space. It doesn't exist in time. But you can think of it, and I hate to use these kind of hippy dippy words, but you can think of it as kind of a spiritual energy emanation of Yahweh's, being or essence on planet Earth. So the only way I can kind of describe it from my own personal experience is, yes, true, Henry Winkler was Jewish. Is Jewish. I think he's still alive. The only way I can explain it is if you've ever been to Jerusalem and you feel this, even though the temple's been destroyed, even though the Ark of the Covenant is no longer there, you feel this presence of God there. You feel this presence of Yahweh there. Okay, I remember the first day that I came to Jerusalem. That was June 23rd, 1993. I had no idea what to expect. I was just kind of seeing, I wanted to check the place out, and I felt this presence of God, and it wasn't because I was supposed to feel it. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just felt something there. So maybe that was whatever's left over of the kavod Yahweh, the glory of God, that still exists in and around the Temple Mount. Okay, but there definitely is Yahweh's energy emanates from wherever this kavod Yahweh is, and where he chose to place it ultimately is in his permanent house that was built on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. Okay, verse 7. Vayomer Moshe el Aaron, and Moses said to Aaron, Ikrav el hamizbeach. Okay, so approach the altar of sacrifice. Let's get our map up again to refer to map of tabernacle. That's the one we've been using. Here we go. Okay, so this is the altar of sacrifice. Say at Hakham. So now Moses tells Aaron to sacrifice the sin offering that we read about above. Et olatecha, That's the burnt offering we read about above, the fully burnt offering. V'chaper be'adcha, and atone for yourself, and for the people. Okay, so we saw. So this has to do with atonement, right? The chatat, the recompense from inadvertent transgression offering, also known as the sin offering, is to atone for any inadvertent mistakes that the Israelites may have made, maybe in the past 7 days, or maybe just in general, basically to give a fresh start. Basically, you're saying to God by bringing this offering, you're saying to Yahweh by bringing this offering, anything we might have done wrong, we would like to say we're sorry for, we would like to atone for it, and we want a fresh start as the temple service, as the tabernacle service now commences. Okay, verse 8 here, and verse 7. Ve'aseh et korban am, and also bring the sacrifice for the entire people. We saw that above. V'chaper ba'adam, and atone for them, kashet tziwa Yahweh, as Yahweh commanded. Okay, so that's it. That's what we're talking about. We have two sets of offerings that are to be brought. One is a sin offering along with a burnt offering, and again, a recompense from inadvertent transgression offering, along with a fully burnt offering for Aaron and his sons, and then also what's called a sin offering and a fully burnt offering for all of the people of Israel. Okay, so now God tells Moses, or Moses tells Aaron to bring those offerings, and then here we have the details of those offerings being actually brought. Okay, verse 8. Why Krav Aaron el hamizbeach? So Aaron approached the altar of sacrifice. Why yishchat et egel hachatat asher lo? And he slaughtered the again, egel is, what are we calling it? Kid, right? The baby goat, the calf. Sorry, the baby cow, the baby bull. The baby bull for the sin offering, the calf for the sin offering, which is for him. Okay, in other words, that first sin offering. Verse 9, yakrivu b'nei Aaron et adam elau, yitbol etzba'o b'dam, yiten al karnot hamizbeach, et adam yitzak al yisod hamizbeach. So the sons of Aaron, they collected the blood to themselves, yitbol etzba'o b'dam, and they dipped their finger in the blood, yiten al karnot hamizbeach, and they rubbed it on the horns of the altar. Okay, the horns of which altar? The horns of the brazen altar. And we have the details of this. This is exactly what we learned about for a sin offering. For a sin offering, actually, I may take that back. No, yes. For sin offering, okay, this might actually be talking about not the altar of sacrifice. I'm going to have to check, okay? And we'll have to go back. No, for the sin offering, let me just remember this now for a second. So for the sin offering, so there are 4 types of sin offerings. And if it's for the Kohen Gadol, then you're supposed to take the blood, walk into the tent of meeting, and you rub it on the horns, the 4 corners of the altar of incense. So I'm assuming that's what it's speaking about here, okay? I'm almost sure that's what it's speaking about. And I don't want to go back now to that chapter and trace it down. But if you remember, there are 4, I won't call them types of sin offerings. There are 4 contexts for the sin offering. The first is for the Kohen Gadol. The second is for the entire congregation. The third is for a leader. And the fourth is for a lay Israelite. This is covered in chapter, was it 4? Let's see. In chapter 4, okay? So we're not going to go back to that right now. But for those first 2 types of sin offerings, in other words, for the Kohen Gadol and for all of the people of Israel, then you collect the blood. The Kohen Gadol collects the blood, or the Kohen collects the blood, walks into the tent of meeting. Kohen Gadol collects the blood, walks into the tent of meeting, and rubs the blood on the altar of incense, which is right over there, okay? So that's what it must be talking about, okay? And that's why it speaks about collecting the blood. Ve'et adam, and the rest of the blood he spilled at the base of the altar. The base of which altar? Again, if we went back to Leviticus chapter 4, we'd see that the rest of the blood is spilled at the base of the brazen altar, the altar of sacrifice, okay? So that is now, so now Aaron is fulfilling the laws of the sin offering. Okay, the first context, atoning for himself and his sons. Okay, and so that again, that gives us, when we understand or when we look back to chapter 4 and we see what's supposed to be done, this now gives us a lot of context as to what's going on. Okay, a lot more than just hearing the rabbi read it in the shul really quickly and then falling asleep towards the end. Okay, verse 10. And the forbidden fats, which includes also the kidneys and the node, I think they translate this as the fatty lobe of the of the liver. So basically all of the forbidden fats he threw onto the altar to go up and smoke, as Yahweh had commanded Moses. Where did Yahweh command Moses? Again, that's exactly what we saw in Leviticus chapter 4, that the forbidden fats from the sin offering are thrown onto the altar. And again, if I remember correctly, when it's one of those first two contexts, in other words, for the Kohen Gadol, which this is essentially fulfilling that, okay? That first context for the sin offering, then the rest of the sin offering, because it's a negative, because it's a bad offering, right? Because it's atoning for something that went wrong. Then the rest of that animal is taken out of the camp and then burned on the ash pile outside of the camp. Okay, and that's what we see right here, verse 11. And the flesh and the skin, and in this case, it's a negative offering, so the skin doesn't go to anyone. All the rest of that offering, okay, in that first context, which is a very serious sin offering because it involves the inadvertent sin of the Kohen Gadol, in this case, Aaron and his sons, but including the Kohen Gadol. So even the skin is burnt, ba'esh is burnt by fire, michutz lamachane, outside of the camp. And remember, we spoke about, when we learned about these various types of sacrifices, we spoke about the ash pile. There's an ash pile outside of the camp, completely outside of the camp. It's in a makom tahor, in a clean place, meaning it's kept ritually pure. We haven't gotten to ritual purity and impurity, but I think you guys all have an idea of what it is. You've all heard of it before. So the rest of this negative offering, this negative sin offering, is not given to the Kohanim to use. It's taken outside of the camp and then burned on and thrown on, and the ashes are thrown on the ash pile. Okay, so that's a sin offering. And this, again, if you go back to chapter 4, which we're not going to do right now, and read the laws of the sin offering, you'll see that here they're being followed to a T, and we know exactly what's going on, and we also know the context. The context is to recompense, as we saw in the verses above, is to recompense for any inadvertent sins that may have been committed, in this case by Aaron and his son. So that's the first context of sin offering of the four contexts regarding sin offering spoken about in Leviticus chapter 4. Okay. Any questions? Any context? Any questions? Any comments? Is it clear? Hey, I'm a Yahweh cultic worshiper and damn proud of it. Hell yeah. I mean, heaven yeah. Cool. And I really, really encourage, I said this last week, okay? One of the great things you could do is, if you don't even want to sit down and read, you could just read in English these chapters. But even more, let's say you don't want to do that. What I do often is, when I'm in the car or when I'm cooking or something like that, the entire Tanakh in English is on YouTube. They may have different translations. I just use the NIV. So if you type in NIV Leviticus or NIV followed by any book in the Tanakh, so if you want to listen to the book of Micah, NIV Micah, it will come up. A YouTube video will come up where it's read in English. And I recommend, they usually call it the dramatized NIV or version or something like that. The voice acting is very good. It's at the right pace. So you can type in NIV Leviticus and listen to the first 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 chapters of Leviticus, and this will just, summarize everything that we've been speaking about here. Okay. So that's the sin offering. Now we have the burnt offering. So this is for the Kohen Gadol. So again, if we were to go back to Leviticus chapter 4, talking about sin offerings, this is that first context for the Kohen Gadol. Okay, so it's the most serious context of sin offering. Okay, verse 12. So he slaughtered the fully burnt offering, the Holocaust offering. Yamsiu b'nei Israel elav et adam, and b'nei Aaron elav et adam, and they presented, I guess you could call it, or brought forth, not brought forth. We'll just go with presented. They presented so the children of Aaron presented to him the blood. Wa is rakehu al amizbeach saviv, and he sprinkled it or spilled it all around the altar. Okay, in this case, it's a burnt offering. With the burnt offering, there's no walking into the tabernacle. There's no walking into the tent of meeting. This is all speaking about here the brazen offering, and that is detailed in Leviticus chapter 1. Okay, this is a burnt offering. Verse 13, wa'et olah imsiu alau le'nitaheha. So they presented to him the burnt offering that has now been cut up into pieces, which again the details are given in chapter 1. After you skin it, you cut it up into pieces. Wa'et harosh wa'yaktir al hamizbeach, and also the head, and they threw it up onto the altar to go up in smoke. They burned it on the altar of sacrifice because it's a fully burnt offering. Everything except the skin goes on to the altar. Okay, detailed in Leviticus chapter 1. And they washed the entrails and the legs, and they threw it onto the altar to go up in smoke. And because it's a fully burnt offering, often in the other types of offerings, the entrails and the legs are discarded. They're not really important parts of the animal. The head, the legs, the entrails, the guts, these are all discarded parts. But because it is because it's a fully burnt offering, no part is discarded. It all goes up onto the altar. The only part that's discarded is the skin. Remember, as we've said many times, no matter what the type of offering, the forbidden fats, and that's why they're called forbidden, always go onto the altar. It doesn't matter for any type of offering except a grain offering where there are no forbidden fats. With any type of animal offering, the forbidden fats always go up onto the altar of sacrifice. That is the food of Yahweh. That is the ambrosia of the Torah. Only Yahweh is allowed to quote unquote eat it. Okay, or smell it. A sweet smelling scent, as it's described as. Okay, so let's just summarize here. There are two sets of offerings that are going to be brought to kick off the cultic, the systematized service of Yahweh in the second year of the Israelites wandering out in the desert. And the first type the first set is going to be a sin offering along with a fully burnt offering for Aaron and his sons, for the Kohen Gadol and the regular Kohanim, and then a sin offering followed by together with a burnt offering for all the people of Israel. In other words, that second context of sin offering that we learned about in Leviticus chapter 4. Okay, and in that second context, when it's for all of the people, that's in that second context. Also, the blood is collected and then rubbed on the altar of incense inside the tent of meeting. For the third and fourth contexts, the third context of the sin offering is for the leader. The fourth context is for a lay Israelite. The blood is not brought inside the tent of meeting. Okay, only the most serious types. It goes from ascending to descending, or from most. I won't say most important, but from most. We'll go from most important to less important. Okay, so if the Kohen Gadol sins, that's big. That's big. That's a big deal. Okay, inadvertently sins. That's a big deal because it affects the entire nation. If all of the people sin inadvertently, that's also a big deal because it affects the entire nation. If a leader sins, that's important, but less important, has a less of effect. It may affect, a certain subset of the nation, but it doesn't affect the whole nation, probably. And if a lay Israelite sins, that's also not great, but it's going to affect less. So it goes basically from the more severe to the less severe in Leviticus chapter 4. Okay, so now we get to that second context, and that's the offerings for the people. There's going to be a sin offering and a burnt offering for the people. Verse 15. ויקרב את קורבן העם, ויקח את שעיר החטאת אשר לעם, וישחטהו כראשון. Okay, so they brought forth the offering for the people, for the entire nation, for all of the people, and they took the sa'ir. Again, sa'ir is now a kid, okay, a baby goat, for the sin offering, asher la'am, which is for the the sin offering for all of the people. Yishchateu, when they slaughtered it, what yichateu kerishon, and they brought it as a sin offering as they did for the first one. Okay. So we're not given all the details. It just says as they did for the first one. What is that first one we're talking about? We're talking about the one that was brought for Aaron and his sons. And why does it say like the first one? Because there's some slight differences. So here it is a goat, and for Aaron it's a bull. I'm sorry, a baby bull, a calf. But the blood is collected. It's brought into the tent of meeting. It's rubbed on the altar of incense, and then the rest is spilled on the altar outside in the courtyard, the altar of sacrifice. So it doesn't give us all the details. It's basically saying just like the first one was brought as a sin offering, so this one is brought as a sin offering for the people. And if you want more details, you go check Leviticus. There was no Leviticus chapter 4 back then, but we'll call it Leviticus chapter 4. That's where all the details of a sin offering brought for all of the people are. Okay, verse 13. So the burnt offering, the fully burnt offering, they presented to him. Then it cut up into pieces. And also the head, and they threw it up onto the altar to go up and smoke. And again, we have almost a repeat, probably word for word, of the previous fully burnt offering. And they washed the entrails, and the legs, and they burnt them on, and they threw them on the altar to go up and smoke. Okay, so the same thing. It's a fully burnt offering. Everything goes on to the altar. Okay. All right. One second here. Oh, I went backwards. My mistake. What am I doing here? One second here. The offering. Oh, my mistake. I think I went backwards. I think I did. I don't know what I did here. Okay, we'll just pick it up here. Okay. Basically, I'm just going to go through this quickly. I'm sorry. I went backwards. I repeated the same verses again. This was for Aaron and his sons, and now this is for the people. Okay, verse 15. And they brought forth, they offered the sacrifice for all of the people. And they took the goat, the sin offering. I already read. Okay, this is where I went backwards. So we'll pick it up here in verse 16. And they brought forth, or they offered the fully burnt sacrifice, and they did it according to its laws. Okay. So we know what those laws are. That's in chapter 1. And they offered the grain offering that's described up above. And he took a handful of it. He filled his hand up with it. And he threw it up to go up, and he threw it onto the altar to go up and smoke. And this was in addition to the olat boker, to the daily sacrifice. What is a daily sacrifice? We learned about this in chapter, was it 7 maybe? Can't remember exactly where, but every morning, let's find that for a second. I think it was chapter 7. I'll just go to the English. Was it 7? Guilt offering, peace offering, fat and blood forbidden priest portion. I can't remember where it is. I'm not gonna hunt it down right now. But every offering, every morning, a burnt offering is to be thrown onto the altar, and that burnt offering burns until the following morning. Remember, the fire on the altar of sacrifice is never to go out. It's to be an eternal flame. It never goes out. The next morning, and we're talking about a bull, so it's a big animal. So it's a whole bull. By the next morning, the ashes that are left over from that burnt offering from the day before are taken, are cleaned, and are thrown on the ash pile, and then a new burnt offering is brought. So every day, the morning starts by a new burnt offering brought for that day. That is the daily offering, and that's what's being spoken about here. aside from the morning fully burnt offering. In other words, the daily offering, which is a fully burnt offering. Okay, let's find that for a second. Just see, it takes too long. I'll abandon ship, but let's see if we can find it. Go to English. It's got to be around Leviticus, maybe it's 6. This is the burnt offering. Okay. Here we go. I'll just read the English. This is Leviticus 6, verse 8. Chapter 6, verse 8. The Lord, Yahweh, said to Moses, give Aaron and his sons this command. These are the regulations for the burnt offering. The burnt offering is to remain on the altar hearth throughout the night till morning. And the fire must be kept burning on the altar. The priest shall then put on his linen clothes with linen undergarments next to his body, and shall remove the ashes of the burnt offering that the fire has consumed on the altar and place them beside the altar. Then he's to take off these clothes and put on others and carry the ashes outside the camp to a place of ceremonial clean. That's the ash heap outside the camp. The fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must not go out. Every morning the priest is to add firewood and arrange the burnt offering on the fire and burn the fat of the fellowship offerings on it. The fire must be kept burning on the altar continuously. It must not go out. So that's your basic daily offering. Every morning, the ashes from the previous day's fully burnt offering are cleaned out, and a new fully burnt offering is added. This means that an offering, a sacrifice, is always burning on the altar, and the fire is always kept going. And then any other offerings that are burnt on the altar are burnt in addition to or on top of this offering. Okay, so that's Leviticus chapter 6. Okay, alrighty. So cracklings, pig skin fat are out of the question. maybe beef cracklings. I don't know. Does the Piggly Wiggly sell beef cracklings? Tsuri? I used to get soy cracklings back in New York. I kid you not. They were pretty good. I think soy cracklings we can settle on. All right. Okay. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate this. But what I would really like for everybody is to go back and go through it in the English. Either read it through in the English. You don't have to focus. You don't have to spend hours on it. Just read it through once, or read it through twice, or read it through 3 times, or go to YouTube, type in NIV Leviticus. Just listen to the first 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 chapters of Leviticus while you're driving in the car, while you're making your coffee or something like that and drinking your coffee. It will all come together, and I'm telling you, it just gives so much context, because there's so many times throughout the Tanakh that these different types of sacrifices are mentioned, and it just gives so much more context when we know why they're brought, how they're brought, right? Doesn't this make so much more sense now? Okay, what is it? That movie, which was a cult classic, which I actually loved. I don't know if I would say it's one of my favorite movies of all times, but it's a great movie. Oh, shoot. I was supposed to be showing it the whole time. Why didn't you guys tell me? Darn. Jeez. Oh, God. Guys, please, if I ever do that again, I've told you, please, a million times, let me know. I forgot. Yes, of course I'm supposed to be showing this. The whole time I was supposed to be showing this. Jeez. I'm upset at myself. If that happens ever again, if we're studying and you don't see the actual text on the screen, please let me know. Please let me know. Oh, God. I can't believe I did that. It happens sometimes because I have to do it manually. All right. Whatever was. What was I going to say? Yeah. It's you guys know the movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and Bill and Ted they travel through time, and they come to what's his name, Rufus, played by George Carlin, and Rufus tells them something and it makes no sense to them. Yeah, now it should be better. Now you should be able to see everything, and it makes no sense to them, and they go through time, and then they come back, and a whole bunch of experiences happen, and they come back, and then to that same thing. And they see themselves actually Rufus telling them again, and then I think Ted looks at Bill and says, "Wow, that made a lot more sense this time, right?" So anyway, once you go through Leviticus, 1 through whatever, we'll say 1 through 9, because now we're going to get in chapter 10 to the narrative to the death of Nadav and Avihu. Then it just really starts to all come together. Okay, I'm really sorry about that, guys. Please, if ever that happens again, you have to let me know immediately, okay? You have to let me know immediately, because the text should have been on the screen this whole time, and I'm very upset. Okay, upset with myself, but help me out. Help me, help myself. All right, so verse 18. Now you should be able to see all the text. Right? Okay. Verse 18. So they slaughtered the bull and the ram as peace offerings, communion offerings, communion slaughters, communion sacrifice, for all of the people that was described up above in this chapter. And they presented to the sons of Aaron the blood. To him, rakehu al mizbech saviv, and he spilled it or spilled it around the altar. Okay, which altar? Again, this is the altar of sacrifice. The only time in these sacrifices that we've read about that anything doesn't take place in the altar of sacrifice is the sin offering in those first two most severe contexts for the Kohen Gadol and for all of the people. Other than that, unless I'm forgetting something, and except on Yom Kippurim, that's a whole different situation. We'll get to that in Leviticus chapter 16. Then, as part of the sacrificial service, part of the sacrifices, Aaron, the Kohanim, never ever enter into the tent of meeting. They enter for other reasons. They enter to clean out the candelabra, to relight the candles. They enter to burn the incense, but they don't enter for the sake of an animal sacrifice in these basic types of sacrifices, except for the sin offering, those first two contexts for the Kohen Gadol and for all of the people. Okay, so here when it says that the blood was spilled around the base of the altar, this is not a sin offering. This is a peace or a communion offering. It's like, hey God, we checking in and saying how much we really appreciate all you do for us, and just want to get close to you. Offering. It's a good offering. It's a positive offering. Okay. So this, when it says that the blood is spilled around the altar, it means the altar of sacrifice. Okay. And the details for the peace offering are in chapter 3, Leviticus chapter 3. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Mauricio. Verse 19. Va'et achalavim min ashor umin ha'ayil, and the forbidden fats, the fats from the bull and from the ram. And now we're going to get some details. So a ram is a male sheep. Aliyah, this is the fat in the tail, and this only applies to the sheep. So the three types of animals, the three types of mammals that are sacrificed are either a bull, a sheep, or a goat. Bulls and goats do not have fatty tails; they have thin little tails. Okay, but a sheep has a big fatty tail, and the fat in that tail is one of the forbidden fats, and that's called the aliyah. Again, I've mentioned it a bunch of times, but you should never, ever, 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 even in the land of Israel, eat a shawarma, because, okay, so here's the deal with shawarma. Okay, shawarma often has, and you can check what your local shawarma, your local shawarma, what do they call it? A pizziola, a shawarmiola. You can check with your local shawarmiola if you like shawarma, or your gyriola if you like gyros, because they're essentially the same thing. So what do? So shawarma in Israel is really supposed to be made out of lamb. That's what original shawarma was, because what do they eat throughout the Middle East, throughout the Eastern Mediterranean? They eat a lot of lamb, okay? But lamb meat is expensive, and shawarma in Israel is like 20 shekels or something like that. So we got to cheapen down the meat. We got to fill in some mystery meat. So what they usually use is, I think, turkey. Okay, but in order to make it have that lamb taste like it should, right? Like it originally should be lamb meat, they take the tail of the sheep and they stick it. They literally stick it on the top of the shawarma thing, or they might just pour the fat there. Okay, and the fat melts and drips down onto the turkey meat and covers the turkey meat, so it has like a little taste of lamb in it. Okay, well, that tail fat is one of the forbidden fats, and it is absolutely 1000% forbidden for us to eat it. We saw in many contexts how the forbidden fat is only food for Yahweh. It's one of the forbidden fats. The forbidden fats are the ambrosia, quote unquote, of the Torah. Only Yahweh is allowed to, quote unquote, eat it, or is allowed to smell it as a sweet smelling scent. It only is to go on the altar. Okay, so if you're in Israel, and I don't know what they do in other countries, why do they serve it in Israel? That is a good question. The reason they serve it on oxtails is oxtail's fine. Oxtail is fine. There's no fat, significant amounts of fat in the tail of an ox. I'm not an expert in meat. I'm actually basically a vegetarian. So I'm definitely not the person to speak to about the details of the anatomy of these various animals. Maybe speak to, there's a guy, Travis Wheeler, who's he does a lot of, I guess he's like the official Karaite butcher. So he'll probably know a lot more about this stuff if you have any details about the anatomy of these various animals. But from a Torah point of view, I do know, and the oxtail is okay, but the tail, the fat from the tail of the sheep is not okay. Okay, so why do they serve it in Israel? That is an excellent question, and the short answer is that the Rabbinites do not believe that the fat tail, the fat of the sheep tail is forbidden. They believe it's only forbidden for an animal that's brought as a sacrifice. So if the animal is not brought as a sacrifice, if it's just an animal that you slaughter, then they do not consider those forbidden fats to be forbidden. However, and we've spoken about this in previous weeks recently, this is clearly wrong. There is basically very, very clear language that says that the fats of these animals can only be given to Yahweh and can never, ever be eaten by anyone else. Just as the blood is never to be eaten by us, what happens to the blood of the animal sacrifices? It gets spilled at the altar of sacrifice. We don't eat it ever. Okay, so the fat we never eat. It's always the food of Yahweh. And if it's not a sacrifice, then those fats cannot still not be eaten by us. They have to be discarded. Okay, so that's the basic. That's the short answer. It's a dispute. It's a machloket between the Rabbinites and the Karaites. The Karaites generally say, and I agree with it 100%. It's clear as day in the Torah in recent chapters that we studied. So the Karaites say that the forbidden fats can never ever be eaten from any animal, Shabbat Shalom Mithan Avior, whether it's an animal that's to be brought as a sacrifice or whether it's an animal that ends up in a hamburger. Okay, the forbidden fats must always be either thrown on the altar or discarded. But the Rabbinites say that if it's an animal that is not a sacrifice, then you can eat the forbidden fats, and they are wrong. They're dead wrong, and they're committing a heinous sin, because eating the forbidden fats of an animal is it's bad news. Okay, it would be like, let's say your dad has his special stash of cigars, or special stash, his special coffee cup that only he uses, and he's not home one day, and you go into the kitchen and you smoke one of his cigars, or you use his special coffee cup to make iced tea in or something like that, right? It's bad news, really bad news. Okay, so any rate, so these again are the forbidden fats that are mentioned for the bull and here for the ram. Verse 20. וישימו את החלבים על הזאת, ויקטר החלבים על מזבחה. And you shall place, and they placed these forbidden fats on the chazot, on the breasts, meaning on the meat of, I think we're speaking here about the ayil, the ram, or it might be both. And they threw these forbidden fats onto the altar to go up in smoke. Okay. And the breasts and the right thigh, Aaron elevated or waved it. This is henif. Okay, it's the same thing that's done to the Omer offering. The Omer offering is called the Tnufat Omer, and sometimes translated into the wave sheaf offering. So henif means to wave, or sometimes they'll say elevate. They don't really know exactly what it was, but either it was lifted up or it was waved up and down. So this is a wave offering, or these portions are a wave offering. Lifnei Yahweh kashet tziwa Moshe. Okay. So we'd have to go back to, let's see here. This is going to be, we have to go back to the peace offering. So let's just check that very briefly. So these are peace offerings, shlamim. Okay. So let's just check that very briefly. Oh, I got to plug in a second, but that's okay. I'll do that. So peace offerings, it's going to be Leviticus chapter 3. And even here, they don't translate as peace offering. They translate as fellowship offering. So I'm going to read through this very, very quickly in English. If your offering is a peace or a fellowship offering, and you offer an animal from the herd, whether male or female, you are to present before Yahweh an animal without defect. You are to lay your hand on the head of your offering and slaughter it at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall splash the blood against the sides of the altar. From the fellowship offering, you are to bring a food offering to Yahweh, the internal organs and all the fat that is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins and the long lobe of the liver. These are all the quote unquote, the forbidden fats, which you will remove from the kidneys. Okay, and by the way, this is speaking about from the herd. So let's skip that because this is here. It's being brought not from the herd. Oh, it is. It's being both from the herd, both a bull and a sheep. Okay, so let's go on. Where were we? Then Aaron's sons are to burn it on the altar on top of the burnt offering that is lying on the burning wood. It is a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So these forbidden fats are what? They're an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So technically, he doesn't eat them; he smells them. And when he smells these fats burning on the altar, it's like it makes him like us. It makes him remember how much he loves Israel, because Israel is bringing him this lovely food that he quote unquote likes. Okay, he likes to smell it. Okay, kind of like when you're driving through the neighborhood and you smell the barbecue, right? The neighbors next door are barbecuing, and even I, as pretty much a vegetarian, I'm not fully a vegetarian, but more or less I'm a vegetarian. Even when I smell a barbecue going, I get tempted. I don't get tempted by the taste, but I get tempted by the smell, right? That smell of your neighbor's barbecue. Boy, you just want to hop the fence and dig in, right? So if you offer an animal from the flock, so now we're talking about the ram, as a fellowship offering to the Lord, you would offer male or female without defect. If you offer a lamb, and that's what we're seeing here in Leviticus chapter 9. So they offered one bull and they offered one ram. So it's a male lamb. I'm sorry, a male sheep. Okay. If you offer a lamb, you are to present it before the Lord, lay your hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall splash its blood against the altar. From the fellowship offering, you to bring a food offering to the Lord. It's fat, the entire fat tail cut off close to the backbone. That's that fat tail that ends up on the shawarma in Israel. The internal organs and all the fat that is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, etc., etc. I'll just skip a bit. Those are the forbidden fats. The priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering presented to the Lord, to present it to Yahweh. So those are the forbidden fats. If your offering is a goat, and then it goes on the goat. That's not relevant because we don't have a goat here. Okay, so this is actually not the part I was looking for. Where's the part I was looking for? Let me go ahead, just drop. So this is the sin offering. We don't want that. I think I know where it is. This is now the guilt offering. We don't want that. I'm going to go to the peace offering again. So the further details of the peace offering, burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering, Leviticus 7, the guilt offering. Here we go. Okay, so this is, I think, what we're looking for. The offering is with the vow. Free meat touches anything strongly eating fat and fermented. Oh, no. Here, this is, okay. Let's do two things here. So let me read this. So this is the peace offering. So these are further regulations for the peace or the fellowship offering. Okay. If they offer it as an expression of thankfulness, then along with this thank offering, they're to offer thick loaves made with yeast and with olive oil mixed in, thin loaves made without yeast and brushed with oil, and thick loaves of finest flour, well kneaded with oil mixed in. Along with their fellowship offering of thanksgiving, they are to present an offering with thick loaves. I'm going to skip this, okay? I just want to find one specific thing. 1 second. No one touches something unclean. I want to see where it speaks about the waving. I can't find it right now. Okay, I'm going to abandon ship. I'm not going to hunt it down right now, but I will. So, getting back to what Paul said, okay, or what Paul asked about why shawarma is forbidden, and me responding by saying that it's a disagreement between the Rabbinites and the Karaites. So let's look at these verses here. I'm just going to read the English. Then Yahweh said to Moses, say to the Israelites, do not eat any of the fat of cattle, sheep, or goats. The fat of an animal found dead or torn by wild animals may be used for any other purpose, but you may not eat it. Right? So here we're not talking about a sacrifice. It's so clear. It's in black and white here. We're talking about an animal that's found dead on the road, roadkill, right? So you can eat the rest of the animal, and I think maybe some people here in this group do. No, I'm just joking. I like to make my my southern. I like to. I have a bunch of southern friends from the south, and of course, I like to tease them, just like they like to tease my home origins of growing up in New York. But okay, no, I know you guys don't eat roadkill off the interstate. I know you buy it at the Piggly Wiggly. It's fine. Just joking. All right, so. Anywho, so anyone who eats the fat of an animal from which a food offering may be presented to the Lord, to Yahweh, must be cut off from the people. So anyone who eats the fat of an animal from which a food offering may be presented to Yahweh, not is presented, may be presented. So any type of animal which can be, or which is one of the accepted animals that can be used as a sacrifice. In other words, we're talking about either bulls / cows, sheep, goats. Okay, you are not allowed to eat that fat. Anyone who eats the fat of the animal, okay, of that type of animal, okay, the Lord must be cut off. I'll read the sentence again. Anyone who eats the fat of an animal from which a food offering may be presented to the Lord must be cut off from their people. And wherever you live, you must not eat the blood of any bird or animal. Anyone who eats blood must be cut off from the people. Just like we're not allowed to eat the blood, right? No one in their right mind is going to say, well, if the animal is brought us to sacrifice, then you're not allowed to eat the blood. But if you just find an animal out in the forest and kill it, you're allowed to eat its blood. No, of course not. We know already back from Genesis with the story of Noah that animals, you're not allowed to eat animal blood. You're not allowed to eat animal blood. So just in that context, the same goes for the forbidden fats. Okay, the forbidden fats. It doesn't matter if it's an animal that's going to be thrown on the altar, or if it's an animal that you find in China or in Alaska that you hunted down and killed. Okay, you're not allowed to eat those forbidden fats, and I think it's clear as day here. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. I hope that answers your question, Paul. Okay. All right. All right. So. Getting back to here, Leviticus 9. So I couldn't find. I wanted to find. I know where it mentioned. I know it mentions it, but I can't find it right now. I'm not going to hunt it down anymore. But we see that for that peace offering, then we have the breasts and the right thigh are waved. Okay, and that's also spoken about somewhere in the previous chapters. I attempted to hunt it down, but I give up. I abandoned ship. Okay, verse 22. Why yisa Aaron et yadao Elam, and Aaron raised his hands up to the people. In other words, he went like this. He's raised his two hands up. Let's see, that. I don't know if you can see because this background thingy. Okay, you get the idea. He raised his hands over his head. And he blessed them. So after he raised his hands over the people and blessed them, and did he give the priestly blessing? Well, the priestly blessing isn't mentioned until later, but I think we can assume that that's the famous priestly blessing. Okay, which, by the way, the oldest verse from the Tanakh ever found is the priestly blessing of Aharon. Okay, in biblical archaeology, and then he left off, or he finished doing the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. In other words, that's a summary sentence of everything that was done from here on that 8th day. Okay, so this is the 8th day after the inauguration is over. This is the beginning of bringing the various sacrifices, and that goes up until here. Okay. All right, verse 23. Moshe Aaron el Ohel Moed, and Moses and Aaron came to the tent of meeting. Itzu, and then they went out, or they entered the tent of meeting, and then they came out. Yivarachu et ha'am, and they blessed the people. Ve'ira kavod Yahweh el kol ha'am, and the glory of Yahweh appeared to the entire nation, to all of the people. Well, this is very interesting, and it's not even clear. It is clear what it means. So the glory can never be seen directly. We spoke about, I think we mentioned it last week, when Moses wants to see God, he says, show me your glory. Yahweh, and Yahweh responds, "You cannot see my glory directly. Lo yureni adam v'chai. No person can see me while he's alive and still be alive and still live. But he says to Moses, I'll hold you in the cleft of the rock. I'll put my quote unquote hand over you. I'll let my glory pass by, and then you could see the aftermath of my glory." So nobody can see the glory of Yahweh directly, not even Moses. So it's clear that the glory of Yahweh appeared before the people, but it's probably enshrouded in the cloud that usually that surrounds that glory of Yahweh. Okay, so somehow it appeared, but it wasn't a direct look at this glory of Yahweh. We can do an entire study on this glory of Yahweh, the glory of God. Again, that's the thing that lives between the cherubim on the cover of the ark, in the cover of the Ark of the Covenant, which is in the Holy of Holies, which is in the tent of meeting, which is in the courtyard of the tabernacle, which ultimately ends up on Mount Moriah, on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, in the land of Israel. Okay, so that's the Kavod Yahweh. So somehow or another, whatever this means, it appeared to the people, or the people were able to see it, but it was not a direct view of the Kavod Yahweh, because even Moses himself could not get a direct view of the Kavod Yahweh. It was enshrouded in a cloud, I would assume. Okay, verse 24. What titzeh esh milifnei Yahweh, and fire went out from before Yahweh. Tochal al mizbeach et haolah wa et hachalavim wa yar kol ha'am wa yaronu wa yiplu al paneihim. So fire went out from before Yahweh. In other words, from this, wherever this glory was, fire went out. So who ignited these sacrifices on this day, on this first day of the sacrifices? It was Yahweh directly igniting the fires that burnt up these offerings. Okay, this was a special day, right? Remember, we started off the chapter by Moses saying, "Come together because the glory of Yahweh is going to appear before you." Okay, where was that? Well, it doesn't matter. Okay, it was up above. And now the glory of Yahweh appears, enshrouded in the cloud, but nonetheless appears. And then fire comes out of that cloud, out of that glory, and lights all of the sacrifices. And this is what kicks off the fire that is supposed to never be put out. Okay? I've got to plug in a second. That fire that is supposed to be never put out, and which I don't know if it was put out at any time in the following 900 years, but in theory, is never supposed to be put out, and in theory, at least continued until the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 585 BCE. Okay? All right. So Yahweh, the point is that Yahweh lights this eternal flame, this flame that is supposed to keep on going day after day after day forever. Okay? Is lit by Yahweh. Okay? That initial fire, that initial eternal flame is lit miraculously, or is lit divinely by Yahweh. Okay. And all of the people saw this. And they raised their voices. They shouted. This is the same root as Truah, like Yom Truah. That's why it's sometimes translated as the day of shouting. And they fell on their faces. Okay. So this was a big event. Okay, we're going to take a break for about 5 minutes, then we'll go on to Leviticus chapter 10. So we see here that fire came out of the heavens, or came out of the cloud, out of the glory of Yahweh, and ignited this fire, and that's a good thing. This kicks off the sacrificial service for the first time ever in the history of Israel, to continue, in theory, continuously forever, but ultimately stopped by the Babylonians 900 years later. But an eternal flame lit by Yahweh on the day after the inauguration of the Levites, of the Kohanim, is complete, kicking off the eternal sacrificial service. Okay, now in chapter 10, we're also going to have fire coming out of Yahweh, but it's going to be not a good thing, right? We now get to the story of Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, who are, well, we'll just leave the suspense, but you guys probably already know. Okay, let me I think there's something called treated wood or something like that, or there's some kind of treatment that you could do to wood which will make it withstand heat. I listened to a gardening channel, the best gardening channel ever. The guy's name is James Prigioni. I've been listening to for a number of years now, and he speaks about how you can treat wood. I think it's, what is it called? I'm not saying they use this method, but there are ways to treat wood to make it heat resistant. and I think it's called, I forgot what they call it, but they basically blowtorch the wood, and it somehow protects it from it gives it a very beautiful finish, and then it somehow protects it from heat. Okay, so maybe that's what happened. I mean, these people were craftsmen; they kind of knew what they were doing. So whatever they were going to build, I'm sure they knew what they were doing. Okay, I'm going to put on music for about 5 minutes. Okay, and then we will pick it up. Actually, I better plug in right now, and then I'll put on music for 5 minutes, and then we'll pick it up. So see you back in about 5-10 minutes.
Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to you are return to what you are return to where you are born and reborn again. La 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 la. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to you are return to where you are return, to where you are born and reborn again. La 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 the whole world shake, my heart, la la so. Levi, the shade of Moledimero. Have your shade, throw, have your shade, throw, have your shade, throw, la 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 la.
Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are born and reborn again. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are born and reborn again. Reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are born and reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are born and reborn again. again. Return to the land of your soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are born and reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are born and reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are born and reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are born and reborn again. Reborn again. להשם, צדיקים יבואו.
לב טהור ברא לי אלוקים, ורוח נכון חדש בקרבי. לב טהור ברא לי אלוקים, ורוח נכון חדש בקרבי. אל תשליכני לפניך ברוח קודשך, אל תיקח ממני, אל תשליכני לפניך ברוח קודשך, אל תיקח ממני. השיבה לי ששון אישך ברוח נדיבה, תשמחני. השיבה לי ששון אישך ברוח נדיבה, ברוח נדיבה תשמחני. עלמדה פושעים דרכיך וחטאים אליך ישובו. עלמדה פושעים דרכיך וחטאים אליך ישובו. עלמדה פושעים דרכיך וחטאים אליך ישובו. עלמדה פושעים דרכיך וחטאים אליך ישובו.
All right. Okay. All right, everyone, let's go on. Let me share the screen before I forget. So now we're going to go into Leviticus chapter 10, and we're going to learn about Nadav and Avihu, the two eldest sons of Aaron, who die, who were put to death. And we're going to learn about how serious it is not to take away from or add to the Torah. And in particular, we're going to see that adding to the Torah is just as serious as taking away from the Torah. Is it not? Well, if there are any doubts, then let's examine the story of Nadav and Avihu, who thought they were doing a good thing by going above and beyond, but who, in the end, got put to death. So I guess the good thing here is, I don't know if you can call it a good thing, but here we finally in chapter 10, and we'll probably just, maybe I'll go through the whole thing, I don't know, or maybe we'll go through half of it, probably just half of it, and then we'll pick it up here next week, I think. We'll see. The thing here is that now we're back into some narrative. It's not pleasant narrative, but it is narrative. Okay? Okay, let me just do a quick sound check. You guys can all hear me and see me. You can all see the screen. You can see scripture. Okay, cool. So we're starting here in Leviticus 10. So the context here is obviously, so this is basically kind of a celebration going on here, right? We have all of Israel gathering together, these various offerings being brought to kick off the sacrificial service to Yahweh once, forever, for the first time ever. Moses and Aaron blessing the people, the glory of Yahweh appearing, and then fire coming out from the glory of Yahweh, or I'm assuming the cloud doesn't say it explicitly, but that would be the implication. The cloud surrounding the glory of Yahweh, or in which the glory of Yahweh is, quote unquote, residing, and alighting, setting the altar on fire to kick off the sacrificial service for the first time in the history of the people of Israel ever. So this is very celebratory. It's a very overwhelming and celebratory celebration. And unfortunately, Nadav and Avihu, the first and second born sons of Aaron, they get a little bit carried away. They get a little bit out of control. And they kind of say, hey, we really want to join in the celebrations. We want to do something special above and beyond for Yahweh. And this is what happens. So we're in chapter 10, verse 1. Waikhu b'nei Aaron Nadav wa Avihu ish mitach machtato. So Aaron and the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, they each one took his censer, 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 not censor, his incense pan. Okay, what is a censer? Let's get a visual on that one. So I don't know if it's exactly like that. Well, at any rate, you get the idea, right? It was probably just a flat pan, because this word is used in the context also of grain offering, but it's an incense holder where you light the incense on fire and it burns. It's a portable incense holder. Okay. We nubahem. I'm sorry. Tachtovi nubahem esh and placed fire in them and lit them aflame. V'yasimo aleha ketoret, and placed upon it, meaning upon the fire, maybe upon the machtat, upon the incense censer. So placed incense upon it. Why? Yakrivu lifnei Yahweh ish zara, and they brought forth before Yahweh foreign fire, asher lo tziwa otam, which he did not command them. So they're bringing this burning incense, and this is what's called here ish zara, foreign fire. Okay, which he did not command them. There's nowhere, anywhere does it say take an incense censer. There are times where an incense censer is commanded to be taken. That's, for instance, in Leviticus 16, when it speaks about the ceremony Yom Kippurim. You walk in with burning incense so that it covers over the glory of Yahweh, speaking about the glory of Yahweh, so that the glory of Yahweh is not seen directly. But this is just completely on their own initiative. They basically take an incense censer and they bring it before Yahweh. What does this mean? It's not clear exactly where they brought it. Maybe they walked into the tent of meeting because that's where the true incense altar is, or maybe they're just out in the courtyard, but they're basically burning this incense to Yahweh. Now we know that the incense, we learn in Exodus chapter, whatever, I don't remember the exact chapter, but we learn that the incense is only is allowed to be mixed, or is only allowed to be used. It's only allowed to be mixed in those specific proportions, only to be burned on the altar of incense. Let's find that for a second, actually. Okay. The incense can only be used on the altar of incense. Oops. Let's see if it comes up. Maybe Rabbi Wikipedia will help us out. Exodus 25. All right, so let's go to Exodus 25 for a second. We'll just do it in English. Okay. The ark, the table, the lampstand. I don't see any incense. Where do we go? Brings the ark, table, the lampstand. Maybe 26. Tabernacle, curtains. I don't know why it's chapter 25. It's weird. Let's try this again. It's 25. Okay. Those time was made of costly materials that the congregation contributed. Exodus 30. Okay, let's go to Exodus 30. Okay, so the altar of incense. Anointing oil, the incense. Okay, so this is the end of chapter 30. I'm just going to read in the English. Then Yahweh said to Moses, take fragrant spices, gum, resin, unkya, and galbanum, and pure frankincense, all in equal amounts, and make a fragrant blend of incense, the work of a perfumer. It is to be salted and pure and sacred. Grind some of it to powder. Let me just make sure that this is showing up correctly. Yes, it is. Grind some of it to powder and place it in front of the ark of the covenant law in the tent of meeting, where I will meet with you. It shall be most holy to you. Do not make any incense with this formula for yourselves. Consider it holy to the Lord. Whoever makes incense like it to enjoy its fragrance must be cut off from their people. Okay, so this is Karaite. This is cutting off. This is excision from the people of Israel. If you take this special recipe and you use it in a way that is not prescribed by the Torah. And where is it prescribed by the Torah? Okay. Aaron must burn fragrant incense on the altar. Let's again look at the map here. Here's our altar of incense right here. It's really the central. I mean, you can kind of assign a hierarchy to the various pieces of furniture in the tabernacle. Obviously, at the top of that hierarchy is going to be the Ark of the Covenant, or specifically even higher than the Ark of the Covenant itself will be the Ark cover, because that's where the glory of Yahweh dwells. But after the Ark of the Covenant, the next highest in the hierarchy is actually the incense altar. And we could see this by its position. It's at the curtain, the parochet, that separates between the holy area and the holy of holy areas. And it's from the incense altar that we mentioned, as we'll see when we get to Leviticus 16, that on Yom Kippurim, on the 10th day of the 7th month, that Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, takes incense off of the altar and then walks into the Holy of Holies with that incense, which makes a cloud to cover over the entire area so that the glory of Yahweh, which dwells between the cherubim on the ark cover, cannot be seen. Okay, so based on its central position, based on the fact also that it's made out of gold, if I'm not mistaken, we'll see it right here. Yep, with gold. Okay. This shows that the incense altar, okay, is really, again, in this hierarchy, is really the second highest piece of furniture, if you could say such a thing, in the tabernacle. Okay. After that, then I guess you can make a case for the menorah, and after that, the showbread altar, the showbread table that's here, and then out here the brazen altar. Okay, why is it called a brazen altar? It's not overlaid with gold. It's overlaid with bronze. Bronze is a less expensive material. Okay, this are overlaid with gold. The menorah is beat from a single piece of gold, and the showbread table is, I believe, also gold. One second. Showbread. I don't know. I can't remember. I think it's also made with acacia wood overlaid with gold. At any rate, so the incense altar is important stuff. Okay. So Aaron, and this is in Exodus 30, verse 7. Aaron must burn fragrant incense on the altar every morning when he tends the lamps. What does it mean, tend the lamps? He's cleaning the menorah. The menorah only burns during the night. The menorah doesn't burn during the day. Where's the menorah? This is the menorah here. Now, as I've mentioned a number of times before, when you go into a rabbinical synagogue, they have what's called the eternal flame over the Ark of the Covenant, and this is supposed to be reminiscent of the menorah. But the menorah does not burn eternally. It was put out every morning, or it burnt out every morning, and then was cleaned every morning, and then was lit at night. The only thing that's continuous is the fire on the altar of sacrifice, as we just saw in the previous chapter, right? So Aaron must burn fragrant incense on the altar every morning when he tends the lamps. He must burn incense again when he lights the lamps at twilight. So incense will burn regularly before the Lord for the generations to come. Do not offer on this altar any other incense or any burnt offering or grain offering. Do not pour drink offering on it once a year, and that's on Yom Kippurim. Aaron shall make atonement on its horns. This annual atonement must be made with the blood of the atoning sin offering for the generations to come. It is most holy to Yahweh, and that's on Yom Kippurim, described in Leviticus chapter 16. So, so we see that incense is sacred. The incense, the formula for the incense, cannot be used for anything else except to be placed on that altar of incense once in the morning, once at night, when the incense is burned. And so that gives us some context to the grave sin of Nadav and Avihu, that they took, it says Ketoret, but I would think, it doesn't say it explicitly, but the implication would be that it's that formula, that special formula, which is only supposed to be placed on the incense altar that we just saw in Exodus chapter 30. They took it, they put it on their not their frying pan, they put it on their incense censer, okay? And they either brought it into the tent of meeting, again, reading between the lines here, because it doesn't say exactly where they brought it. But one can assume maybe they brought it into the tent of meeting, because that's where this incense altar is. Or even if not, then they brought it before the Lord, meaning somewhere in the courtyard. But that's what they did. Okay? And this is called Eish Zara, foreign fire. Asher lo tziwa utam, that he did not command them. So they're taking their own initiative, thinking they're doing more for Yahweh. But what happens, verse 2, what titzeh eish milifnei Yahweh, and fire went out from before Yahweh with tuchalotam, and consumed them, burnt them to death, basically. We amutu lifnei Yahweh, and they died before Yahweh. Okay, so we saw, and this is not my chidush, this is not my idea, but this has been pointed out by many commentaries, that in the previous verse, remember, fire came out. This is when fire comes out, or when they're offering the sacrifices and fire comes out. Where is it? Oops. Yeah, the last verse of chapter 9, fire comes out and lights the sacrifices on fire, right? It kicks off the sacrificial service for once and for all, right? For the first time ever. And now fire comes out, okay? And here it says, with titzeh esh, we can look at the language in the with titzeh esh milifnei Yahweh, tochal al mizbeach et olah, etc. So fire went out from before Yahweh and consumed upon the altar of sacrifice, upon the altar, the burnt offering, and etc. Okay? And now we have exactly the same language. Remember here, with titzeh esh milifnei Yahweh, v'tochal. And here we have with titzeh esh milifnei Yahweh with tochal. Okay, it's the same words exactly with titzeh esh milifnei Yahweh with tochal, and fire went out from before Yahweh and consumed. Okay, and here Wititze, where were we? Wititze ish milifnei Yahweh witochal. Okay, it's the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words exactly, word for word. Okay, and this is obviously deliberate. This is to, I guess, create a narrative kind of contrast or narrative continuity / contrast. The Torah does that. It uses words in a very effective way to show the difference between fire for good purpose, for a purpose that Yahweh commanded, and fire for a purpose that Yahweh did not command. It almost reminds me of when Joseph interprets the, yeah, right, better to ask for forgiveness. Yeah, tell me about it. So it almost reminds me of when Joseph is interpreting the dreams for the baker and the cupbearer of Pharaoh, and the words are used deliberately. So the same words are used by Joseph. So the cupbearer goes first, and Joseph says that Pharaoh will raise up your head, will lift up your head, and restore you, which is a figurative way of saying, in other words, like put your hand, figuratively speaking, put his hand. Pharaoh will put his hand under his chin and lift his head up. In other words, restore him to his former office of being the cupbearer to Pharaoh. And then the baker, hearing this good report, this good interpretation that Joseph is giving of the cupbearer's dream, tells Joseph his dream, and then Joseph says, Pharaoh will lift up your head off of your body. Okay, and the same language, almost word for word, is used in both cases to show that contrast. Okay, we see the same thing here. It's the same 5 words. Fire went out from before Yahweh and consumed and ate up and burnt up. Okay, so in the previous verse, it's used to kick off the fire on the altar, and here it's used to kill, to destroy, to burn to death Aaron's first and second born son. And so that contrast is deliberate. Okay, one for good, one for bad, just like the 2 dreams of the cupbearer and the baker, one for good, one for bad. Okay, in each case, Pharaoh will lift up your head. For the first one, lift up your head and restore you, raise up your head and restore you to your service. And the second one, raise up your head off of your body. In other words, behead you. So, okay. Right. And they died before Yahweh. So let's go on. Oh, and one other thing I want to say is I think it's clear, given, again, the context here, that this is all part of this inaugurate or this kickoff ceremony for the sacrificial system. So it might be that very same fire that consumed the sacrifices on the altar that came down. I don't mean the same flame, but that same at that same time or on that same afternoon or whenever they were doing it, that came down and consumed Nadav and Avihu. Okay, so it's linked in time as well. This happens all on the same day. They're celebrating, they're happy, and they get a little bit out of control and pay the price. Wayomer Moshe el Aaron, and Moses said to Aaron, Hu asher diber Yahweh. This is what Yahweh has spoken. Lemor, saying, Bikrovai ekadesh wa'al pinei kol ha'am echabed wa'idom Aaron. So, Bikrovai ekadesh, through those who come close to me, I shall be made holy. Well, bikrovai, okay, those who come close to Yahweh, this may mean, some commentators point out, this may mean the Kohanim. They're the ones who actually perform the sacrificial services. Okay, so this may be saying through those who are we freezing? Oh darn! Here we go with the freezing. I think Chrome is frozen up. Oh, it's unfrozen. No, has it? No, it's frozen. Oh, there we go. I'll give it another minute. Again, for some reason, this seems. Oh, wait. Are we back? No, we're not. Wait, we are. No, we're not. I don't know what's going on. 1 second. Let me see. Yeah, we're frozen, I think. Oh, there goes the beach ball. All right, I think I'm going to give it another minute. If not, I'm going to have to restart the computer, which means I'll be back in 5 minutes. I don't know why this seems to happen once every study when I'm using Chrome, and I have no idea why it happens, but it's happening. Give it another second to clear. If not, I will see you guys back in 5 minutes. From previous experience, I'm pretty sure you guys can hear me, but my face may be frozen. Whatever the case, I'm going to restart the computer. I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Okay. All right. Can you guys hear me? Are we back? Sound check. Okay, we're back. Okay. It freezes up. There's nothing much I can do about it. All right, we're sharing the screen. Okay. So, Bikrovaya Kadesh, those who come close to me, in other words, those who approach me, meaning the Kohanim, they're the ones who approach Yahweh to bring the offerings. And in fact, an offering in Hebrew is called a korban. Korban comes from the underlying root kuf resh bet, which means to come close to. Okay, so even though it's called the sacrifice sometimes, or it's called an offering sometimes, really offering is a better translation than sacrifice. What it really means is a korban is something that is offered. It's an offering. It's brought close. It's presented to Yahweh. So really, sacrifice is a horrible translation. Offering is a much better translation. And most of the translations actually use offering, but sometimes you'll see sacrifice. Okay, and by literally by the faces, but by all of the people, I shall be honored. That's the same word, kavod, the glory of Yahweh. I shall be glorified, or I shall be honored. Okay. We dom Aaron, and Aaron remained silent. He didn't know what to say, or he had nothing to say. Okay. So basically, Yahweh is excoriating, Nadav and Avihu. He's obviously by his actions, he's showing what a horrible crime it is, but then he's explaining, okay, who the heck are you, to decide how you're going to honor me, to decide that you're going to, after I, quote unquote, Yahweh went through all of these incredible details on exactly how to build the tabernacle, what is supposed to be done, when it's supposed to be done, the details of the sacrifice, the details of all of these details. You're just going to ignore them all and do your own thing? No. Nuh-uh. Ain't going to happen. All right. And not to make light of it, but that's an important lesson that we see here. That's an important lesson that we see here. Hello, Ilan. Shabbat shalom. Shavua tov. That's an important lesson that we see here, that doing more is not better than doing less. And who are the main, I hate to use the word criminals, but I'll use the criminals of doing more in the Torah? The rabbis, the rabbinical Jews, the rabbis. They have added so much. They've taken away also, but they've added so much to the Torah, so much insanity and ridiculousness and nonsense. Okay. I was listening to a video today. It's actually Shlomo Carlebach telling a story. Shlomo Carlebach, you guys may know, the singing rabbi. He was telling a story about some great Hasidic Rebbe who said that he told everyone in his household that when you cook the Shabbos food, you should always constantly be saying L'chvod Shabbat, in honor of Shabbat, right? I put the potatoes, I cut the potatoes, I say L'chvod Shabbat, in honor of Shabbat. So that's adding to the Torah. Okay, he's not saying it's a commandment, he's saying it's a good idea to do it. But then Shlomo Carlebach goes on to finish the story, and he says that this Rebbe one time was sitting on Shabbat meal, and this was in Bnei Brak in Israel, kind of the ghetto of Tel Aviv, as opposed to Mea Sharim, the ghetto of Jerusalem, or Geula, I like to call Galut, the other ghetto of Jerusalem. So at any rate, for those of you who don't know Hebrew, you missed all my good jokes there, but it's okay. So at any rate, so then the Rebbe is served soup and he won't eat it. He refuses to eat it. And his wife, the holy Rebbitzin, asks him, why you're not eating the soup? And he says that he knows. How does he know? I guess, clairvoyance. He knows that the woman who was cooking that soup, who had just been hired in his household, did not say L'chvod Shabbat, in honor of Shabbat. I should have explained what L'chvod Shabbat is. In honor of Shabbat, was not saying it enough, or it was not saying it while she was preparing the soup. So he refused to eat it. So he wouldn't eat. So this poor lady, worked to make him this soup for Shabbat meal, and he refused to eat it because she wouldn't repeat in honor of Shabbat, in honor of Shabbat, in honor of Shabbat while she was making the soup. So I sent this to a couple of friends of mine, this story, and I said how to make a woman cry according to the rabbis, right? Imagine if you go out of your way to make soup for the Rebbe and he refuses to eat it because you weren't saying in honor of Shabbat while you were making the soup. Anywho, so what was my point? I have no idea. What was I saying? Right. So adding to the Torah, right? So the rabbis are the arch criminals of adding to the Torah. And I will point out a video I did many years ago. Which is do not add and do not take away from the Torah. Let me find it for 1 second. I think I posted it last week, but it's very relevant. And it compares keeping the Torah properly to being on the peak of a hill. Okay. If you want to go up to the pinnacle of a hill, if you want to go up to the peak of a hill, if you go not far enough, you're not at the peak. But if you go too far, you're also not at the peak. You're going down the other side. So taking away from the Torah is not going far enough. You're not at the peak. Adding to the Torah is going too far. You're also not at the peak. You're not keeping peak Torah. Okay. So let me see if I can find it. I'll put the link. But it really describes this idea. You know, I did this video many years ago. I think, oh my God, 15 years ago at least. But I'll find the link if I can for a second. People seem to like it, so that's why I'm going out of my way to find the link. Just give me a second. Videos. 1 second here. There it is. Okay. Share. Copy link. Close this out. Come back here. Okay, so there's the link in the comments. Okay, so you can take a look at that video if you want. People seem to like it. So that's what's going on, right? So they're adding to the Torah. Now, this always reminds me of the story in, let me see if I can remember exactly where it is. You know what? Let's go to Rabbi Google and ask him. Okay, 2 Samuel chapter 6. Let's look at this. I think I'll just do it in the English because it's kind of getting late. But let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 6 for a second. And we have the story. So the ark has been taken by the Philistines. Had been taken previously by the Philistines, and David now defeats the Philistines, and he wants to take the ark back and bring it to Jerusalem. Okay? So we have here, I'll just go over to the English. So David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. It's a big army, especially in those times. He and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of Yahweh Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. So we see that that's where his throne is, right? Between the cherubim on the ark. We've mentioned that many times. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it. So we have this guy, or these two people, Uzzah. In Hebrew, it's actually Uzziah, but we'll just call him Uzzah. So Uzzah and Ahio, they're driving the cart, the wagon on which this ark that is now being brought back to Jerusalem by David, which had been previously stolen by the Philistines. The ark of the covenant actually resided among the Philistines for a while. So now David recovers it and he's bringing it back to Jerusalem. And these two people, Uzzah and Ahio, are driving the carriage on which the ark is sitting, is resting. And Ahio is walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before Yahweh with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nakon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the ox stumbled. So here we have this guy Uzzah. Okay, the ark is sitting on a carriage being brought up to Jerusalem. The oxen stumble, so Uzzah is afraid the ark of God, the ark of the covenant, is going to fall onto the ground. It's going to fall onto the floor. Well, if you ever belong to a Torah synagogue, a rabbinical synagogue, you know that if a Torah scroll falls onto the floor, you're supposed to fast for 40 days. Or 40 people are supposed to fast for 1 day, right? So imagine the ark of the covenant falls onto the ground, okay, onto the dirty ground. So Uzzah is trying to save the ark from this, from this shame, or from this, becoming dirty by falling on the floor, from this horrible thing that might happen to it. Okay, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. Well, that's a great thing, right? He's trying to save the ark of God. But Yahweh's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, Yahweh struck him down and he died there beside the ark of God. Okay, what did Uzzah do wrong? Uzzah was not a Levite. Only the Levites are allowed to carry the ark, are allowed to touch the ark when it's in transit. We learned that back in the book of Exodus. Uzzah is not allowed to make any contact with the ark. And here in English, the translation is irreverent act. If we went to the Hebrew, we see it in the Hebrew. But nonetheless, the point is, Uzzah thought he was doing good. He was sure he was doing good. He didn't even think. It was just a natural reaction. The ark of the covenant of God is about to fall onto the dirty ground. He reaches out to try to save it. And yet what happens? Is he praised by God? Is he given a thank you? No, he's put to death. Therefore, God struck him down and he died there beside the ark of God. It really seems unfair. But the fact of the matter is that Yahweh has his rules, and only the Levites, specifically the Levites from the Kohat clan, are allowed to touch the ark when it's in transit. Okay, and even David is angry. And then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Peretz Uzzah. So even David can't comprehend God's behavior. Okay, and quite frankly, I can't. That actually angers me too. So it doesn't anger you, to be honest, right? David was angry because of Yahweh's wrath, right? It doesn't make sense. Here, Uzzah was trying to help. He's trying to save the ark from disgrace, and he's put to death because the law is only the Levites are allowed to touch the ark of the covenant. So instead of getting a thank you, he gets put to death. And even David finds this angry, or finds this angering. And I must say, I find it angry too. And I think any sensible person would say this is just totally unfair. But you know what? Yahweh has his ways, and we sometimes don't understand why he does what he does. And we can't question it. And that's what we see here in 2 Samuel verse 6. Okay? All right. So let's go back. We'll finish off a little bit more here. I'm going to stop, I think, after the end of this narrative part. Okay. So let's go on. So Aaron didn't say anything. Wayikra Moshe el Mishael well el Tzafan b'nei Oziel dod Aharon. So Moses called to Mishael and El Tzafan, the sons of Uziel, who was the uncle of Aharon. Okay, so who's the uncle of Aharon? So who's this Uziel guy? I guess, well, the father of Moshe and Aaron is Amram. So I guess Amram's brother. Let's look it up for a second. Name several Israelites, but okay. Well, we don't have to hunt it down now, but ostensibly Moses and Aaron's father's brother, Amram's brother. And he said to them, Kirvu, s'u et achechem me'et pnei hakodesh el michutz lemachane. And he said, come close. And the language here is kirvu, come close. That's the same language we saw up above. Okay, those who come close to me, I shall be made holy. So I think this is deliberate. Now he's saying, come close, not to deal with the sacrifices, not to honor God, but to carry away the dead bodies of those who thought they were doing good, but were actually doing bad. They were actually adding to the Torah. Okay? Su'et achechem. Okay, lift up or carry away your brother, and this is not technically their brother, right? This is their nephew, which shows again that the word achechem or the word ach doesn't always mean brother, and in fact, it's often translated as kin rather than brother, and that's is the correct translation. Sometimes it specifically means brother, but sometimes by extension it means near kin. So me'et penei hakodesh, from before the face of the holy area. What is the kodesh? The holy area is this area right here. Okay. So maybe we get, so it says before the face of the holy area. So I guess now that does give us a little bit of indication that maybe they didn't enter in, but they were right in this area, or they were out in the courtyard somewhere. Okay, to show where they were bringing that incense altar. Okay, or that incense censer. Outside of the camp. Why? Yikravu wa isaum bekutanutam el michutz lemachane asher diber Moshe. So they came close, they approached them, and they carried them away in their their tunics. So these are not, so if they're the uncle of Aaron, they are not priests. They're not Kohanim, because Kohanim are only Aaron and his descendants, right? But nonetheless, they're wearing tunics. Okay, and maybe the idea is specifically they're not priests. It's not it's maybe not proper for the priests to carry away these dead bodies, but nonetheless, they're wearing tunics like priests might. And mechutz lemachane, outside of the camp, asher diber Moshe, just as Moses has told you to do. Okay. Vayomer Moshe, and Moses said El Aharon, said to Aaron, U le'elazar u le'itamar, banao, banao. Stop. Okay. So Moses said to Aaron, the bereaved father, who's just lost his first and second born son, and to Eleazar and Itamar, that's the third and fourth born son of Aaron, who are now basically going to take over for Nadav and Abihu. Okay. So the remaining members of the family, okay, Banav, his sons, Roshechem an tif ra'u, uvirdechem lo tif ramu, velo tamutu. Okay, let me stop there. So Moses says to Aaron, he basically says to Aaron, Eleazar, and Itamar, he tells them to refrain from outward expressions of mourning. These are typical outward expressions of mourning. The first one is Rashechem Atif Ra'u, which could be interpreted as either messing up your hair, okay, disheveling your hair, or letting down your hair, or taking your turban off your head. And in this context, it would probably be that, because we know that the Kohanim, they wear turbans on their head. Even the lay Kohanim, not the Kohen Gadol, wears a turban on his head. So it probably means don't take the turban off your head, which is a typical sign of mourning. And do not crinkle or rip, tear your clothing. That's also a sign of mourning that Jews do to this day. When a close relative, when a parent or something, God forbid, dies, then Jews to this day will rip their clothing. And this goes all the way back to the time of the Tanakh. Okay? So basically refrain from any outward signs of mourning, that in order that you should not die. Okay? You can't do this now because you're still on this you're still serving as Kohanim, and this is the first day of the sacrificial, this is the first day of the inauguration, basically. I won't say inauguration because it's a 7-day inauguration, but the first day, this very special day when the sacrificial system, the sacrificial service is kicked off for all times. Okay? Well, I'll call so, and not only will you die, but God is going to get mad over the entire congregation. Okay? Because you, Aaron, and now the two remaining sons, you're representing the community. You're serving in the holy temple. You have to continue doing, not in the holy temple, in the tabernacle, you have to continue doing your job. You're not allowed at this point in time to mourn. Okay? I also have to say, I found this quite mean. Okay? They weren't even allowed to mourn the death of, Aaron wasn't even allowed to mourn outwardly the death of his own sons. And his brothers weren't allowed to mourn the death of their two older brothers. Okay? But if there is a little bit of compensation, is that your kin, your brothers, all of the house of Israel, they will mourn over, literally they will cry over this asrifaz, the burning up. In other words, the consuming by fire of Nadav and Avihu, Asher Saraf Yahweh, which Yahweh burnt, which Yahweh sent fire upon. Okay, burnt up. Okay. Verse 7. Mipetach ohel moed lo titzu, and do not go out from the entrance of the tent of meeting. Okay, and that means again, entrance of the tent of meeting means the courtyard. We know that for the 7 days that the Kohanim that were serving, that were inaugurated, were not allowed to leave this area, and now they're being told still don't leave this area. Pentamutu, lest you die. Kishemen mishchat Yahweh alechem, because the anointing oil, the anointment oil of Yahweh is upon you. We asuk dvar Moshe, and they did according to the word of Moshe, according to the what Moshe told them. Okay, so we see that this is okay. So let's just finish this out for a second here. Let me go to the English for a second. So if we go back to Leviticus chapter 8, okay, we know there's a 7-day inauguration ceremony, and we saw at the end of chapter 8, okay. Do not leave the entrance of the tent of meeting for 7 days until the days of your ordination are complete, for your ordination will last 7 days. Okay, you must stay at the entrance of the tent of meeting day and night for 7 days and do what the Lord requires, so you will not die. Again, entrance to the tent of meeting is a euphemism for the courtyard, the tabernacle courtyard. Then we go to Leviticus 9, and it's already the 8th day. And now we start the kickoff of the sacrificial service to Yahweh for all times. And then when we go to chapter 9, so when we go to chapter 9, then as we just saw right now, right? Then Moses said to Aaron, do not tear your clothes, etc. Okay, do not leave the entrance to the tent of meeting or you will die, because the Lord's anointing oil is on you. So this would imply that it's still within those 7-day period. Okay, so just bear with me here for a second. We know, so the rabbis say something that how do they say it? What's their phrase? In mukdam ve'in muchar b'Torah. There's no early and there's no late in the Torah. In other words, what they're trying to say is that sometimes the Torah is not in chronological order. Now, I don't exactly agree with them. But sometimes, yeah, I guess technically you could say it that way, but sometimes what the Torah will do is it will tell a story later that is saying this is what had happened. So I don't think it's technically out of chronological order, but it may harken back to something earlier, which it didn't describe at the time because it would not have been appropriate because it was dealing with other issues at the time. Okay, there are a couple of examples of this in the Torah, and I think maybe that's what's happening here. I think that this death of Nadav and Avihu, and maybe we could even check the commentaries. I think from the context, because Aaron and his sons are being told not to leave the entrance of the tent of meeting, not to leave this area, and we know they're not supposed, because the anointing oil is on them, and that was only supposed to be for 7 days. So I think actually that this is now, so this is not being told in the middle of this entire section on the ordination of Aaron and his sons, and then the kickoff of the sacrificial service, because it wouldn't be appropriate, right? Or it would be kind of a diversion. And then after that, now it's being told that this is actually what happened during that 7-day period. And I'm pretty sure, now that I think about it more, I'm pretty sure that that's what's going on here. That this is actually hearkening back to some time during that 7-day period, during that 7-day inauguration period, that this all happened. Okay? Let me get a little commentary on this. We'll do a little, let's see, Robert Alter mentioned something like this, and then we'll check Ibn Ezra, and then I'm gonna end for the day because I see a lot of people disappeared already, and I don't like talking to the wall. But on the other hand, it's also getting late. It's been a long study. It's been almost 3 hours. So let me just see what Robert Alter may have to say about this. So we're in Leviticus 10. Okay. So Leviticus 10, let's look at some commentary here. So this is what Robert Alter has to say. So Leviticus 10:1. So Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, took their censers, and Robert Alter has to say about that. Now that the elaborate system of sacrificial regulations capped by the rites of installation is completed, we are reminded what a dangerous business the cult is, and the cult again means that systematized the official systematized service to Yahweh. It doesn't mean a cult like Scientology or something like that. Is by the catastrophe that befalls the two sons of Aaron when they violate cultic procedure. Okay, this is one of the two narrative episodes in Leviticus. Okay, put fire in it. So this is also in verse 1. Okay, they put fire in their incense censers. So practically, as many modern commentators observe, they would have filled the fire pans with glowing coals, not an actual fire. The literal sense of fire, esh, is worth preserving because it makes evident the measure for measure enactment of divine justice. Good point, but not relevant to what we want to look at. So let's go on. Incense upon it. The feminine form of upon it in the Hebrew tells us that the incense is put on top of the coal since the fire is feminine. So we actually mentioned that, but it actually may be referring to the machvat, but it doesn't matter. Alien fire, the adjective zara, alien. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about this right here. Okay, they offered what the NIV translates as unauthorized fire, but in the Hebrew it says esh zara, literally alien fire. Okay, the adjective zara, alien, strange, as in stranger or unfit, indicates in cultic contexts a substance or person not consecrated for entrance or use in the sacred precinct. Hence Jacob Milgram's translation unauthorized. We've mentioned Jacob Milgram's a lot. I don't think he's alive anymore, but he was perhaps the world's leading expert on the book of Leviticus. The consensus of modern interpreters with precedence in the classical midrash is that fire is alien because it has been taken from a profane source, e.g. coals taken from an ordinary oven. I disagree with this. It says also midrash. This is rabbinical. This story is a polemic. Okay, now we skip that. Fire came out from before the Lord. This is the same phrase used in 924. This is what we mentioned just before. This is the same phrase used in 924 to report the act of divine acceptance by which a supernatural flame consumes the offerings on the altar. Exactly the same 5 words, right? The zone of the holy where the divine presence takes up its headquarters is intrinsically dangerous. From a certain point of view, radically ambiguous. When proper procedures are followed, a virtual obsession of these priestly writers, miraculous signs of God's favor are manifested. When procedures are violated, God becomes a consuming fire. Okay, those close to me. So this is now referring to verse 3. Okay, this little statement. Among those who approach me, I will be proved holy. In the sight of all the people, I will be honored. So that's what Robert Alter is speaking about here. Okay, those close to me, I will become holy. The reference is to the cultic inner circle of designated priests. So we mentioned that, right? Close to me are the ones who bring the korbanot, the offerings, okay? With an obvious pun on the verb from the same root involved in brought forward alien fire. The meaning of this cryptid one-line poem is not entirely transparent, but the reference to being honored in all the people's presence lends some support to the view of several medieval Hebrew commentators that the spectacular punishment in Nadav and Avihu, who as sons of Aaron will be close to God, evident to all the people is what is intended. God is hallowed by manifesting his power against transgressors. So your brothers, the term is used in its frequent extended sense of kinsmen. We just mentioned that, since Mishael and Elzaphan are actually the cousins of Nadav and Avihu, right? The cousins? I thought it said the uncles. Doesn't matter. Okay. In their tunics, Rashi proposes that the divine fire miraculously killed them. Okay, that's Rashi's stupidity. We're not going to go there. Okay, and now we get to verse 6. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Itamar, do not let your hair become unkempt, do not tear your clothes, right? No outward signs of mourning for Aaron and his two younger brothers, and Nadab and Abihu's two younger brothers. That is, you are not to perform any of the conventional gestures of mourning, for your sons have perished in violating the very trust of the sanctuary that has been given to you, and your descendants instead you may allow the people as a whole to take up the burden of mourning. So it's not like mourning was forbidden, it's just that they're not allowed to do it because, again, I think they're in that 7-day inauguration period, even though it comes after, right? The 8th day. Remember, we said Leviticus chapter 9 starts on the 8th day, Shmini. Shmini means 8th, and that's even the name of the rabbinical parsha, Shmini. But I think actually the story that's being told here is within those 7 days, okay? You can skip this, and then already skips onto other stuff. Okay. So it doesn't mention it. It doesn't mention anywhere that this took place within the 7 days, but I'm pretty sure it's clear. And I want to look, to finish off, I want to look at the Ibn Ezra on these verses, because the Ibn Ezra is a super good commentator, unlike Rashi, who's literally one of the worst Torah commentators ever in the history of Judaism. So let's look at Ibn Ezra on these verses. Oops. It's not here. Nicholas, Rashi, Ibn Ezra. Leviticus 10. So we'll start here. Okay, so here's Ibn Ezra. He's a great commentator. I'll just do it again in English to make it go quick. Okay. So Ibn Ezra does relate to this. So each of them took his censer. Each man took his fire pan. I believe this event also took place on the 8th day. Behold, this day have they offered their sin offering is proof of this. Verse 19. So he says it's on the 8th day. Interesting. And I think actually maybe he is right. Let's see, 19. See, he's a great commentator. Right. He makes an excellent point. So then if it is on the 8th, and actually it would make sense because remember we were saying at the beginning when we started this chapter, that fire came out. It's that same fire. It seems like the same fire that came out on that 8th day. Yeah, it's got to be the 8th day. I take it back. It's not during the 7 days. It's got to be the 8th day. Okay, let's see what else he has to say. But then the question is, why aren't they allowed to leave? I guess maybe this 8th day, they're also not allowed to, this first day of the beginning of the sacrificial service, they're not allowed to leave the area of the tent of meeting either. Let's see what Ibn Ezra has to say. No, he's right. I take it all back. He's 100% right. Okay. It was on the 8th day. And put fire therein, not from the fire that came forth from the Lord. This is the meaning of strange fire. Okay. They acted on their own, were not commanded to burn incense, and certainly not to employ a strange fire. I'm not going to get caught up on the strange fire thing, but here, let's go to verse 2. And they died before the Lord. They thought they were doing something favorable before him. That's exactly what we've been saying. They thought they were, by adding to the Torah, that they were going above and beyond, that they were the most pious, just like the Haredim, just like the ultra-Orthodox, think that they're the most pious because they add so much. They have all these ridiculous laws that they've added onto the Torah. Are they more pious? No, they're less pious. They look like fools to anyone who is any common sense and looks at these people. They look like utter fools. Okay, they have some things right. I'm not going to lie about that. You know, they have strong communities, lots of children, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, they look like fools. They're not doing above and beyond. They're taking away from the Torah. Okay, Ibn Ezra on verse 3. This is that the Lord spoke. God has previously told me that he will demonstrate his holiness through those who are close to him. And that's that little poem here, this one-line poem, okay? Where was it? No, Leviticus 10. Oops. Let's do it from here. Okay. Where do we go? This little poem here. Among those who approach me, I will be proved holy, etc. So Ibn Ezra says there, God has previously told me that he will demonstrate his holiness to those who are close to him. Our verse is similar in meaning to you only I have known. Amos 3:2, I will be exalted when I show my sanctity through those who are close to me. I will then be glorified. Okay, we can skip over that a little bit. Let's see if there's anything relevant here. Okay, this is relevant. Some say that the incense was before the altar of the burnt offering and the Levites entered there. Others say the incense was on the altar of incense and that Moses took them out of the tent of meeting, right? So we discussed this. Right? That maybe they brought the incense into the holy area, into this area here, because that's where the incense altar is. So Ibn Ezra picks up on that. From before the sanctuary, the references to the courtyard. The latter, as I've explained, is referred to as the sanctuary in contrast to the camp. Yep. All right. Let's see if there's anything else worth. Okay. Some say that tifra'u galus means this is really all from the word tifra'u means rend, action. Galus really the word. Right. This close should be rend. Okay. I'm going to just skip ahead of this, even though it's very interesting. He's great. He's great. Okay. Now let's see what he says here. He doesn't say anything here. This is the verse, and do not go out, and so do not go outside. Oh, wait a second. No, nothing. All right, and that's it. So he doesn't anything on that one verse about not going outside of the tent of meeting. So I'm going to go with the Ibn Ezra. I'm going to conclude by saying I'm going to go with the Ibn Ezra and say, yes, it was definitely on the 8th day. I take back that it might have been on during the 7-day period, and that even though it doesn't mention explicitly that they're to remain on this 8th day within the courtyard, it only mentions that they're to remain there for the 7 days of the consecration of the inauguration. That I guess the intention is they still are on this first day when the sacrificial system is being kicked off, that they're still required to remain within that area of the courtyard of the tabernacle, and therefore they're not allowed to show any outward signs of mourning, and they are not allowed to leave that area. Okay, so we're going to end here, and then we'll pick it up next time here in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 8, where we get some instructions. Okay, in the wake of the death of Nadav and Avihu. So we'll pick it up there next time. Any questions, any comments before we go? Anybody? All right, then I guess I'm going to end it here. And I thank you all for joining me. It's been a very, very interesting study, if you ask me, but then I always find it more interesting. And I wish everybody Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. We will see you guys Be'ezarat Yahweh next week. And we will take it from there and go out with some music. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.
Na 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 Nai nai na 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 nai 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 na nai 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 na na nai Na na nai 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 na 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 nai 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 na 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 nai
Nay 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 na na nay Hashem Melech Hashem Malach Hashem Yimloch Le'olam va'ed Hashem Melech Hashem Malach Hashem Yimloch Le'olam va'ed והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי ננאי 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 נאי 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 השם מלך השם מלך השם ימלוך לעולם ועד השם מלך השם מלך השם ימלוך לעולם ועד והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד הוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי 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 אוי נאי 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 השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד ננאי 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 נאי 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 אוי נאי 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 שיר למעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים מאין יבוא עזרי עזרי מעם השם עושה שמיים וארץ אל ייתן למות רגליך אל ינום שומרך הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל השם שומרך השם צילך על יד ימינך יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה השם ישמורך מכל רע ישמור את נפשך השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד